Hello, dear listeners. A quick heads up about audio quality here. I don't know what we were drinking when we recorded the Dread Possibilities section, but it had the loudest ice cubes in the world. So every now and then you're going to hear some rattling going on. Sorry, we couldn't edit that out. Enjoy. The Wonderful World of Darklords. Attached notes. Hadestown. During my time in Olympus, I caught sight of a ferry coming to the shore. A handful of scrawny, underfed indigents ran up to board it, each clutching 2 coins in their hands. The ferryman took their coins one by one, allowing them to file onto the boat, but shoved one man out with a sneer, tossing what must have been counterfeit coins into the water. Then he pushed off the coast and oared out to sea, vanishing into the mists. Curious, I asked the weeping man who had been cast aside about where the ferry was headed. The tale he told me was a strange one, but stirred memories of legends I had heard in other domains. A caravan in Harakir, a dark carriage in Barovia, a train in Zaricia, all were bound for the mists, and through them, for Hadestown, an underground city where work was plentiful for the hungry and desperate. In exchange for a meal, the man told me countless stories he had heard about it. Everybody dressed in clothes so fine, pockets weighted down, but admitted he could not verify them, as no one who has traveled to Hadestown has ever returned. As my patron will see, however, I was eventually able to find one exception to this rule, who told me a very different tale.
Welcome to Wonderful World of Darklords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft domains of dread, because the enemy is poverty. Support us on Patreon.
Along the way, we'll look at the Darklord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate the setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, Hadestown. Or, as it says in the DM's write-up, Hades, apostrophe, space, town.
You can't copyright Hades
or a
having
town. There was a Hades, and he can have a town.
But, Tom, that's not a Disney movie.
It's not anything. It's not a movie. It's not any kind of movie.
Like, Home Alone was at least a family movie.
Yes, owned by Disney.
There's a reason this is a bonus episode.
Yes, yes. So this is a real departure. I think this is the biggest departure we are likely to have at any point.
Yeah.
We're going to do stage play. If you want us to do Wonderful World of Broadway, hit us up on Patreon. Oh,
Lord, please tell me there's a market for this.
Pay us our money.
Do not tempt me with a good time.
Pay us money, we'll do Wonderful World of Broadway. This was inspired by our planning for our previous episode, Hercules. It helped. We were both kind of getting into Hadestown about 6 months before this started. We started planning for Hercules.
I had heard that it was amazing. I had been meaning to listen to the soundtrack for literally years. And then we were in an Old Gods of Appalachia game, and one of the other players mentioned that she saw our characters having like kind of a Persephone-Eurydice relationship. And I was like, I need to look up what that is, because the way to get me to actually jump off the pot and like get into what I'm supposed to be, getting into is to connect it to a game that I'm in.
Right, the research, yeah.
So finally listened to Hadestown. I was like, holy potatoes, Tom, you have to listen to this.
And I listened to Hadestown, and I was like, this is really good. All those Tony voters know what they're talking about. So we were getting into it around the same time as we were like doing the prep in the same like 6-month period. We were doing the prep for our Hercules episode, which you should listen to. It's great. Mm-hmm. And originally we were talking about, we were planning the outline, and Rachel originally like, we should have a sidebar where we're like, you could also really easily do Hadestown. That like writes itself. And they're like, you know what? That does write itself.
It does write
itself. So, yeah, this is too good of an idea and too perfect of an idea for our format to just leave as a sidebar saying, figure something out, it's easy. So we decided we would follow up Hercules with a very unique bonus episode.
Because it's like, once again, don't threaten us with a good time. We are both really loving, just like falling into this glorious Hadestown rabbit hole, doing all this research. Yes, we are happy to just have a Hadestown episode, because it means more Hadestown.
And like, heads up, neither of us have seen Hadestown. We have listened to the soundtrack. We have read the lyrics. I've watched a couple making of. like YouTube videos about people talking about the process, the weird Vermont puppet show version of things. And
I've watched the bootlegs on YouTube.
Yes, I've watched a couple of scenes, musical numbers bootlegged on YouTube.
I've watched the whole thing, and the main one that is on there, man, that person has a huge crush on Amber Gray. It does not matter who the main character of the song is. That camera's on Persephone.
So, that's where we're coming at this from. I wish we could see it. That probably would really help us create the setting and really inform it. So if you're like, but wait, they totally ignored this thing in the staging. That's why, because it wasn't something happening with Amber Gray, apparently. So just please, like, keep in mind our understanding of Hadestown is basically like with the equivalent of we bought the soundtrack album and listened to it. Like that's our best guess.
If it is ever touring within 2 hours of DC, we will go see it. But
so if you have seen Hadestown and you're like, what about this thing from the staging? Please hit us up on social media. Like, let us know.
Please do. Yes, I want to know as much about Hadestown as I can.
And hopefully we'll someday come to this neck of the woods and we will go see it and maybe go revisit this. Who knows? Yeah. But in the meantime, just heads up, that's what we're going off of.
And if you're, listening to this and being like, I love Wonderful World of Darklords, but I don't know anything about Hadestown. It's on Spotify. It's on, various music things. Go listen to it. Read the Wikipedia synopsis. Go listen to it. It's phenomenal.
It's really good.
I think you'll basically know everything that we know going off of it. So
we looked at this as a sidebar, and we said, this is another kind of iteration, pop culture thing people of our generation are enjoying that has a Hades as a kind of main character. But we said, wow, this isn't just a fun coincidence of main characters of Greek mythology. This is also an iteration of Hades that makes a perfect Dark Lord. And let's talk about that in a section we like to call
The Lord. The Lord. Unsurprisingly, the ruler of Hadestown is Hades, or rather Mr. Hades, a fey lord of industry, wealth, and power. Once, he would spend half the year below the ground in Hadestown with his wife, Persephone, a spring eladrin. When she went above ground, she brought warmth and plenty with her. When she returned to her husband below, the chill of autumn would set in. As time passed, however, Hades became increasingly fearful that Persephone would remain above ground forever. After all, could a spring eladrin ever love him enough to choose him and his underground city over a world of sky and sunlight? Driven by paranoia, he began to call her back to Hadestown earlier and release her later. Today, the land above Hadestown enjoys perhaps 3 months of summer before the winter freezes it solid. This, of course, motivates the desperate and hungry people above ground, to say nothing of those in other domains, to seek out work in Hadestown. In exchange for their labor, Hades offers plentiful food and shelter to his children. However, their failure to return for so much as a visit, to say nothing of Persephone's reluctance to travel below, made me secretly happy for my informant that he could not pay the ferryman.
So our Dark Lord for the episode, as is our Dark Lord for the previous episode, is Hades. But not just Hades. Our Dark Lord here is Mr. Hades. Because that is a really, I think, important qualifier.
Yes.
That he is for almost every character in the musical. He is always Mr. Hades.
Mr. Hades.
Mr. Hades is our Dark Lord. They probably know who Hades in general is. They might, if they clicked on this, know who Mr. Hades is specifically. But Rachel, what is a Dark Lord?
Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness that causes the dark powers to go, why, hello, new friend, we want to play with you forever. And so they pluck that person up and they put them in a domain that is a special hell tailor-made just for them. There are really good Dark Lords. There are Malus Scalarises. We're going to get into him later.
Oh boy, I don't know who that is.
You too, but you don't know that you
Okie
do.
dokie.
So we are going to get into the qualities that separate the Strahd von Zaroviches from the Malus Scalarises. We have 4 that really make for a good Dark Lord.
I'm going to pause real quick because I think there's a chance some people are listening to this podcast who don't know much about Dungeons & Dragons and just like, oh boy, Hadestown! I love it! Tell me about it! Just talk about how great it is! And I can nod. So I just want to take a quick pause, even more than usual.
Yes.
Just in case that is you, if you have a nerdy friend who knows anything about Dungeons & Dragons, ask them about a guy named Strahd.
Yeah, he's kind of like the Dracula of D&D.
Yes,
more
yes.
or less.
And the concept is that some people, like Rachel said, are so evil that in the D&D sort of cosmos multiverse, they get pulled into this kind of little bubble reality. Mm-hmm. And they're sort of the center of the bubble reality, and it's kind of built around them. Mm-hmm. And our whole conceit is that Mr. Hades from Hadestown makes a great one of these guys. Mm-hmm. And Rachel's about to say, there's a whole bunch of these little bubble realities in the D&D multiverse. There's a whole books of them. Mm-hmm. And we're saying they all have these darklords, these like central villain figures. And we are going to talk a bit about what, as Rachel said, are 4 qualities that we think make the good ones from the guys I've never heard of, or have heard of, but who are so unmemorable that I don't remember their very silly name.
His daddy was a druid.
Oh,
yeah, that guy. Yeah, we're gonna get into him later. Yeah, trust me, he sucks.
He does. Yeah.
But Strahd does not suck. So Strahd is kind of the Dracula of D&D. And the first thing that he does that a good Darklord does, well, a well-done Darklord, an evil Darklord.
Just go with it. You know what I mean.
Gets them put into this bubble reality, is that act of ultimate darkness. And in Strahd's case, his younger brother was engaged to marry this woman named Tatiana, and Strahd wanted Tatiana for himself, and so he murdered his brother so that he could be with Tatiana. Mm-hmm. And that was his act of ultimate darkness. That's bad. Our second quality is what, in the main Ravenloft source book, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, they call the torment. Since we're usually a Disney podcast, not in this case, we call it they got what they wanted, they lost what they had. Basically the idea that, they kind of got everything that they thought they wanted, but it came with a horrible price that basically, nullified all of that. Mm-hmm. So in Strahd's case, yes, he killed his brother, and he became a vampire, so his brother is out of the way, and he thought that part of why Tatiana didn't want to be with him was because he was too old for her, but now that he's a vampire, he has eternal youth, so that's not an issue. But when Tatiana found out that he had killed her fiancé, she had no interest in being with Strahd, and this creepy vampire is coming after her, and so she ran away from him right off the edge of a cliff. Mm-hmm. Fell off the edge of said cliff. And so she died, but not only that, she keeps reincarnating over and over again, and rejecting him in every reincarnation. Uh-huh. So yes, Strahd, you got rid of all the external things that were keeping you from Tatiana, but you're still yourself. Mm-hmm. And Tatiana doesn't want you.
And never will.
And never will. Our third quality of a good Darklord is that there's an element of tragedy and relatability. Mm-hmm. They're not just evil for the sake of being evil. There's something about them that makes us wince in sympathy. And dear listeners, chances are you heard that and you winced in sympathy.
Yeah.
Because, no matter how horrible an incel Strahd is, the object of his affection does not want him and never will continue reincarnating and rejecting him for all eternity. That sucks.
Unrequited feelings, that's a good way to give a villain a little stab of sympathy, because that just is such a horrible thing to imagine.
Yeah.
And lucky you if you've never had that happen personally. Cannot draw on personal experience. Most people can. Mm-hmm. I bet you can imagine how that would feel and how just much that would suck.
Yeah.
So you're you're a monster, but oof.
Oof, yeah.
Oof.
And then our fourth quality is the domain reflects the Darklord and their curse in some way. So the domain is that reality bubble that they get put into. And in Strahd's case, basically, he got put into the D&D equivalent of Transylvania.
Yeah.
It's gothic vampire land. He is a gothic vampire. His domain is gothic vampire land. There's another domain that's Egypt mummy land. That is not his domain. That does not reflect him. And also, the domain reflects his curse because, he killed his brother, thus kind of condemning himself to loneliness by his own choice. And also, he's yearning for Tatiana and can never be with her. So, part of his curse is that loneliness of never being with her. And the domain is full of all these kind of, peasants who are never going to be an intellectual equal, or never going to be any kind of, martial challenge for him. He is always going to be bored. He is always going to be lonely, not just in not having Tatiana, but in his life in general because his domain reflects that curse.
So going through, I hope...
Real quick, actually, before we go through.
Yes.
So we've explained that for our listeners who are here for Hadestown and not for Ravenloft. But here, I think normally we can say, you've already, you know, we're a Disney podcast, we've previewed, you've gone and watched the movie on Disney Plus because you're Disney fans.
Yeah.
There might be a lot of our listeners who aren't familiar with Hadestown. So we should probably talk about that.
In the previous episode, we could say, and I think it's a safe assumption, even to you all, maybe new people listening right now, you've all seen Disney's Hercules. Or you can with very little trouble.
Familiar with it.
Whereas we cannot say you've all seen Hadestown because we haven't.
We have not.
We're y'all, and we haven't seen Hadestown. The statistical vast majority of people listening to this have not seen Hadestown.
Yeah.
So, Hadestown is a musical. I believe the author is Anais Mitchell.
Yes.
Yes. Yay! Go me. So, it is taking two sets of related Greek myths. It's most strongly based in the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus losing Eurydice to the underworld, trying to descend into the underworld to get her back. And then also Hades and Persephone, which are characters in that Orpheus and Eurydice story, but this is kind of making them co-protagonists.
And in the Hadestown take on Hades and Persephone, as all of my fellow romance readers will know, there are a variety, a huge spectrum from non-con through dub-con, all the way up to fully consensual Hades and Persephone romance. Con, yes. This is that last one.
Yes.
Hades saw Persephone, and they locked eyes and fell in love on the spot, and she willingly went down to Hades with him.
And this is a dramatic parallel with sort of that Orpheus loses Eurydice, and we have this kind of cycle of Hades is always losing Persephone as she goes up to the surface world for summer. And the really cool thing about it, the thing that makes all those musical theater nerdy friends you might have buzz about it, is it's actually imagining this in a kind of... I read one thing describing it as a halfway between the Dust Bowl and the Apocalypse. This kind of in 1930s industrial hellscape, Dust Bowl kind of Great Depression setting, where Hadestown is actually, it's not just the underworld where the dead go, it is this kind of enormous underground city full of factories, because Hades is also that god of wealth.
Plutocracy comes from Pluto, the Latin name for Hades.
So the writer is spinning that off and really digging into the wealth and underground and mining and excavating and kind of also making him god of industry. So there's all this imagery of Hadestown not just being full of people, but specifically it's huge factories and refineries and power plants. And it's very much the world of industry.
Which is great when your wife is a nature goddess.
Yeah. Doesn't go well. So here, it's not that Eurydice is bitten by a snake and dies, in a sense of the underworld. It's that in desperation for food, why we'll talk about in a moment, she signs this contract to come be a worker in Hadestown. But it's you're trapped there. Once you sign the contract, once you get on the railroad and go down into the tunnel and to the end of the line, you are just stuck in Hadestown forever, and eventually kind of, Greek underworld, Lethe style, you even sort of lose your memories and just become this kind of worker bee in this giant hive of industry that is Hadestown. And part of the reason she's so desperate for food is that in this story, to kind of draw some of the parallels with Orpheus and Eurydice, and this actually bringing it back to that first quality of a good Darklord, our act of ultimate darkness. In this story, Hades keeps getting Persephone earlier and keeping her longer. So there's a lot of lines about how there's never fall or spring anymore. It's just 9 months of winter and then 3 months of summer.
Yeah.
And during summer, when Persephone's up above, there is still abundance. There is still crops. There is still joy. There is still life. But times are getting harder and harder and harder. And it's very much going for a environmental climate change kind of once again Dust Bowl eco-apocalypse, that the world is dying because the king of the underworld is holding sort of life. The industry is sort of devouring life and devouring nature. And that's why there's so much starvation, there's so much hunger, and why Eurydice agrees to go work in Hadestown, which is one of the few places you can, like, get a steady job and, like, three hots and a cot. So that is our act of ultimate darkness, is keeping Persephone, is breaking the deal. Is getting her early, keeping her long. She's supposed to be up top 6 months out of the year. Now it's only 3 months out of the year. And the reason we're making that an act of ultimate darkness is it's not the worst thing he does. Like, Hades does a lot worse stuff in the play and in the backstory of the play.
Just making Hadestown itself is pretty awful.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And, like, the way that happens to the workers and the way he treats the workers and all that is pretty bad. But the reason this is his act of ultimate darkness is because this is breaking his own moral code. Like, Hades is kind of the god of industry. I read one review that described him as the boss of bosses. It's part of why he's Mr. Hades, because he's the boss of bosses, and he's just the kind of, like, capitalist jerk who would be all a contract is a contract is a contract.
That's more or less exactly what he says when Orpheus comes.
Yes, yes.
Those aren't his exact
More
words,
poetic
but
than
that's
that.
the gist.
Yeah.
When Orpheus comes to get Eurydice, it's like, no, I can't let her go. A contract is a contract is a contract. She signed it.
Like, I didn't hold a gun to anyone's head. I didn't hypnotize anyone or drug anyone. Every single person down here willingly and knowingly signed this contract. But he has broken his own contract. And he had this deal with Persephone, but he is increasingly breaking that deal. And so even in his own sort of hyper-capitalist moral code, that's a violation of that moral code.
It's kind of, if you've listened to our Jungle Book episode, what we were talking about with Shere Khan, of the Shere Khan's done a lot of awful things, but his act of ultimate darkness is breaking the law of the jungle.
Right, was killing just for sport. And same thing here. This is even violating not just general morality, but his own morality. So that's our act of ultimate darkness. And there's a bit of icing on the darkness cake. It is leading to an apocalypse in the upper world. And once again, and a wonderful commentary on some capitalist industrial issues, that's leading so many of the workers to desperately join Hadestown. It's his fault. He is creating the conditions of desperation that are driving people to accept these horrible contracts and these horrible deals.
Yeah.
But for him, way worse than that, for his morality, is breaking his deal with Persephone. Now, our torment.
I'm bringing up the lyrics after 3
here
right
we go.
now.
So our torment, they got what they wanted, they lost what they had. In theory, they get everything they wanted, but they are miserable. Everything is worse than it was before. It's a critical point with these darklords, is that they always end up being more miserable than they were before they did this act of ultimate darkness. So maybe like Orpheus could tell us what his torment is?
So are people who have listened to Hadestown, you're like jumping up and down in your seats right now.
Right.
Are people who haven't listened to Hadestown, one of the things I love with it, so you've got, just like with the myth, Orpheus, Hades asks him, okay, well, if you're gonna take Eurydice, you have to sing me a song first. And Orpheus sings a song. And it's always an issue with these kinds of stories where someone, like, has the best piece of music in the whole wide world.
Rent.
Rent, yeah, his song is not as good as One Song Glory.
Not worth 5 years of your life?
No, One Song Glory was better, man. Just go with that. But so sometimes it's anticlimactic. But the great thing with Hadestown is it is a heat-seeking missile guided directly at Hades.
Yes.
So even if you don't like this song, Hades does, because it's just for him. And it's about how he used to be just a man in love with Persephone, but has kind of lost himself and has, created Hadestown. But in making Hadestown, he's lost Persephone, and Orpheus gives us our torment.
Yep.
What has become of the heart of that man now that the man is king? What has become of the heart of that man now that he has everything? He got what he wanted. He has everything.
He got what he wanted.
The more he has, the more he holds, the greater the weight of the world on his shoulders. See how he labors beneath that load, afraid to look up and afraid to let go. So he keeps his head low, he keeps his back bending. He's grown so afraid that he'll lose what he owns. But what he doesn't know is that what he's defending is already gone.
Yes, it's so good. As part of the greatness of this show is that we have a deep sympathy for Hades, who is our villain of the show, and is a real terrible person by a lot of metrics. But there's this deep sympathy with recognizing the kind of misery and emptiness at his heart, and not just in terms of the show, but the idea is that's what makes Orpheus able to reach him, is that Orpheus also feels this deep empathy for him as an artist and recognizes the emptiness inside of him. So he is jealous and lonely and paranoid. And when Persephone leaves, he's miserable. He misses her so much.
And he's terrified she won't come back.
Terrified she won't come back. He's jealous. You know, he has a line about he pictures his lover in the arms of the sun, and the jealousy moves within him black and cold, and he's terrified she won't come back. So he's holding her tighter and tighter and tighter and making her more and more miserable. Like,
no, holding her tighter will great.
Yeah, that'll be great, right?
That'll end well for everyone.
And just causing her to pull away. So yes, technically, she's in Hadestown longer in the year, like 9 months out of the year instead of 6 months out of the year. But she doesn't like Hadestown. She hates Hadestown. So she's like more and more and more and more miserable and resentful. And he is grabbing tight to her, but that's pushing her away at the same time. So he has what he wanted, which is Persephone around more, but he lost what he had, which is Persephone not hating him.
Yeah.
That's so good. It's so perfect.
He's lost Persephone's love.
Yes. He has Persephone, but he's lost her love. Element of tragedy and relatability. Those noises we were just making, right? And that deep, tragic paradox of their relationship, of this couple where it's sort of like Persephone deeply loves him in this version, but she hates Hadestown, and she was like willing to do what had to. That was like the compromise they came up with. And he's breaking that compromise, but it's because he's so afraid and insecure and jealous and paranoid, and they truly love each other. But I think we can all imagine that just flailing treadmill of the relationship is starting to fray, so one of the parties is just getting clingier and clingier and clingier, and it's just making everything worse. Like, the actions Hades is taking to hold Persephone to him are what is driving her away, and that is just deeply, profoundly, classically tragic.
And even just that she's so miserable in Hadestown that when she's there, all she does is drink, so he doesn't even have her real self.
Yeah.
Like,
he doesn't even enjoy the time he has with her. And this goes beyond Persephone. This is the thing we're going to talk about a bit more. But the idea is this is sort of his fundamental dilemma of his whole approach to his kingdom. That he wants control because he's afraid. He's afraid of losing his wife. He's afraid of losing his kingdom. So he wants tighter and tighter control over those things. But of course, that endangers it. Like, the tighter he squeezes his hand, the more slips through his fingers. And he's as miserable as anyone in Hadestown. He is as hardworking and exhausted. You know, he is not the kind of evil rich boss who's sitting on a beach sipping tropical drinks and being fanned with palm fronds. He is like working himself to the bone every day to keep all the balls in the air and just to keep everything under his thumb. And so he's that line that he bends his back. That's how they refer to the workers a lot. This idea of, no, he's as trapped as they are.
The more he has, the more he holds, the greater the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Yeah, it's so good.
Oh, there's a reason we had to do this.
Yeah, right.
There's a reason we had to do this.
So finally, our fourth quality, the domain reflects the Darklord's personality or curse. It's Hadestown. Yeah. It's the town of Hades. So there, check. I mean,
the end.
Yeah, Strahd is not called Strahd, Sylvania, his land.
It should be, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the town symbolizes... So it's good writing. So the external of Hadestown is a reflection of his inner self.
Yeah.
And that's what all of these reality bubbles, which are called domains, that they all are supposed to be. These kind of reflections of the inner self of the Darklord. So this Strahd Sylvania is the reflection of the inner self of Strahd. And in this case, that's so good. I don't even start. There's a really good song. And it's Persephone complaining about how, like, it's so hot, it's so bright.
This was the one, I started listening to Hadestown first, and this is chant 1. And I got to chant 1, and I was like, Tom, you have to listen to this right now.
And I was like, gosh dang, wow. Wowzers.
Tom loves a driving backbeat.
Yeah, I do. What can I say? So he's built this, like, industrial hellscape. Persephone described it as a neon necropolis. And it's this kind of combination of, like, a coal mine and 1950s Detroit and, like, Times Square.
And Las Vegas.
And Las Vegas. I heard someone describe it as... I didn't make the connection. It was Rachel made this connection. That he sort of built this false simulacrum of, like, spring or summer. Like, it's hot, it's bright, it's like this false parody of the upper world, but it's not. And
because Persephone comes and she says, in the coldest time of year, why is it so hot down here? In the darkest time of year, why is it so bright down here? And Hades says, oh, lover, you were gone so long. Lover, I was lonesome, and so I built this place. More poetically than that, obviously. He's getting into all the ways he built it. He made this bright, warm place like spring, like Persephone.
Like what she wants.
He is missing her, and he wants to make this place that reminds him of her.
And then maybe she'll be happier here now that it is bright and warm, like summer. But it's just making her miserable. And she hates it more and more every time she comes.
Because, who wouldn't want to go to Las Vegas instead of being in the sunlight?
But so he has this false spring. There's a line you're going to hear again, where it says, everyone and everything in Hadestown I own. That he has this controlled...
Excuse me.
He's made this controlled society. He owns everything. He possesses everything. That desire for control, that safety, and that fundamentally he has a line later. God, I keep saying that. Sorry. I know.
The lyrics are so good, guys. They're so... I know. Dusty Purple always has on the bingo cards for the episodes. It's so bad, you guys. Hadestown is the opposite. It's nonstop. It's so good, you guys. It's so good.
Like, I'm trying to say, if you're a listener of ours and thank you for joining us on this journey, and you have it, and you were just like, oh, Hadestown, I hear that's good. Like, maybe I'll listen. I'm sorry, this is not going to be easy to follow. Like,
I'm sorry.
This is not for you, really.
So good.
Listen to the soundtrack.
It's so good, guys. It's so good.
That... He's saying something about how, like, women are fickle and women's hearts are fickle, and he's, Orpheus is a singer, and he's saying something about trading the music for, like, a new music, and that's the music of machinery. Also, we're going to hear that line again. And fundamentally, that's what he wants. He wants this machine, because a machine is absolutely ordered, absolutely controlled, absolutely predictable. A machine that's never going to push against him. He's going to have absolute control. And even the idea that in Hadestown, that's what he wants his people, his workers to be. He wants them to basically be cogs in a machine. So even, like, you go to Hadestown, you sign the contract, and yes, you have food, you have shelter, you have this material comfort, all your material needs are met, but you never stop working, and you kind of start to lose your memory and your identity. Eurydice, she forgets her own name, she forgets Orpheus's name, she forgets almost all of her life, except there was this person that loved her, and, like, that would go away in time. Like, she would forget that eventually, because fundamentally what he wants are, like, robots.
Yeah.
He wants people who exist to be cogs in the machine, and that is the perfect society for Hades, is a giant machine of work, and that work is just producing.
Because, and again, going back to the domain reflected of the Dark Lord, in case we've lost the thread of that, because he wants control.
Yes.
And because his act of ultimate darkness stemmed from wanting to control Persephone. It's all about control, but at the same time, even kind of like going back to what we're talking about with Strahd, he's miserable.
Yes.
He's lonely. He's even like, there was, there's a thing in... The musical where he's kind of like, to begin with, he's seducing Eurydice, and it's to make Persephone jealous.
Yeah, he does, yeah.
She means nothing to him, he says as much. But he never will be able to have a replacement for Persephone, even if he actively started looking for one, because they're just going to turn into worker bees on him.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens when you have ultimate control and you have robots, is that's what they are. They're like... He's
robots. Yeah.
So,
and if
so
he
good.
would
Good.
If Persephone were to, like, if he were able to get that kind of control over Persephone, then he wouldn't love her anymore. Like, that's the thing, is he loves her because of who she is, but who she is, he can't control who she is, and it's good. Okay, we're just going to do this forever. So, okay.
Oh, please listen to it, guys.
So, in the Dungeons & Dragons book, where it gave these reality bubbles, these domains, these different darklords, there would go through the darklord, they'd say who the darklord is, and that was our very, very long wind-up to that, one sentence fragment that's in the write-up, and they go through a couple other things. And one is, it says, what are the basic stats they use? And this was weird. There's not like God of the Underworld, Artificer. No, I picked the Winter Eladrin. Because it is a kind of very powerful, like, fairy elf creature that is a kind of associated spirit of winter. They're associated with winter, so that's got a good connection to Hades right there. And they've got ice power, which also fits Hades. They have a power called Icy Rebuke, which fits Hades very well. Like, if you attack them, they get... Who the hell do you think you... They can kind of do that and actually do damage to you. And with same thing, if you need to stat Persephone, I would do a Spring Eladrin for obvious reasons. And also, with the Summer Eladrin, they're more like just straight joy, but the Spring Eladrins are the one where they're sort of like a euphoria, which was very much fitting Persephone. So like a lot of their like spells are magical effect about making people feel this like euphoric joy, like almost like madness of joy. And
they're living it up on top.
Living it up on top. There's dancing and hollering and having a great time. Other powers he has as Domain Lord. First, he has a lot of goons. He has a supernatural control over the people he owns, his workers, and this is not like a charm ability. This is just straight up dominate. This is straight up, he can just cast pretty much at will, dominate person, command, like, things like that. Because he just orders them and they have to obey. And they don't get a saving throw. If they've signed this contract willingly, which is connected with our other thing. Once you sign the contract, anyone who willingly, knowingly signs a contract to come work for him in Hadestown is now under his control. They get no saving throw over his command abilities. He's doing modify memory to remove anything not useful to him, any memory that does not make them a good worker. And it's a wisdom saving throw, but the DC goes up. So this idea of, no, eventually you lose it. And if you have a very strong will, like Eurydice, you hold on to it longer than some people. And there's some things you might be able to hold on to when other things are gone. But eventually, if you're there long enough, you're going to forget everything about who you are.
You'll look like that too someday.
Yep.
This generally is just, for making them be worker bees. But if anyone does come into Hadestown, then he can also make them show what happens to trespassers who have no respect for property.
The random group of people will just turn around and start beating the heck out of you if he commands it.
If your best friend is in Hadestown and he commands it, your best friend will start beating the heck out of you.
Also, we quoted Princess and the Frog once with Got the One Lost They Had, and another quote we've come up a couple times. The real power in this world ain't magic, it's money. And he is titanically wealthy. He is the god of wealth. He is the god of industry. Whatever problem-solving tool he needs that wealth could give him, he has access to. So just titanically, Olympically wealthy. Literally, just mountains of money. He owns everything. Seems like he owns everything. He owns everything. Everyone works for him. He just sits on giant dragons' hordes of wealth.
King of silver, king of gold.
Yep. And then all of our Darklords have this one shared power, which is called closing the borders. They have this domain, this reality bubble, and the idea is they can close the borders so people can't go in, or most importantly, can't go out, which is basically a plot device for the DM to be like, no, you can't just leave Transylvania. Because, wouldn't you, if you were like, oh, wow, we're in Dracula's Transylvania. When does the train arrive to take us out of this horrible place? Why don't they just leave the haunted house? And the answer is they supernaturally can't.
Yeah.
So we are imagining that closing the borders is a huge storm. That we have that storm that drives Eurydice sort of to Hades. That is a storm that represents the wrath of the gods. It kind of, the storm is the tension, the clash, the anger, the hatred between Hades and Persephone. And all of that raw power of two gods in conflict with each other surrounds the borders. He also has a kind of a sub-border thing, which is Hadestown.
Because when we're talking about his domain, it's like there's Hadestown itself, like the town that's under the ground where he has control over all these worker bees. But there is also kind of the above ground where the people live who are kind of caught in the crossfire of this fight between Hades and Persephone. Like basically where Orpheus is, where Eurydice was before she went down into Hades.
That's part of this reality bubble.
Yeah. So for that, like, for that wider domain, that's everything.
Right.
The storm is closing the borders. For Hadestown itself, there's
the only way in is this train. When he controls the train and he controls the gates. Like if he shuts the gates, There's no way in, and the only way on the train is a ticket. So you have to get a ticket. You have to buy a ticket or get a ticket from him or someone working for him or sign a contract to get a ticket. That's the only way to get on the train. The train's the only way into Hadestown under the ground. However, there is a back way he can't control. This is what Orpheus does, right? This is the mythology.
Walking, Jack.
Yeah, there is this series of tunnels you can go. It's very long. It's very dangerous. There's no map. There's no compass. You just sort of need to follow the thread through this labyrinth. But he can't close that. And that's important because it represents the lack of control.
Yeah.
And he knows it. Like, he knows people can get in and he can't stop them. And that is a huge itch in his brain. That he can put as many guards, he can put as many monsters as he wants, as many Cerebuses as he wants, but fundamentally he can't completely lock his Hadestown as like a closed circle that only he has the keys to. Well, by the way, I heard I said guards, I said monsters, I said labyrinth. I hope you're hearing our D&D listeners. Fantastic dungeon. Like, this is the dungeon portion of our program. This is the dungeon, the literal dungeon dive. And it even is your classic. They enter and they have to get to the bottom level. Yeah. That's where the boss fight is.
We'll get into this more later, but it's the whole, like, obviously, you know, when Orpheus is singing the song to Hades to try and convince him to let Eurydice go, that's going to be a social encounter. Yeah. But you can absolutely have this be this combat test.
Yeah, right.
Journey.
Cerebuses everywhere. Cerebi. However, he can't stop people from getting in, but, like in the mythology, you can only leave with his permission. You can only leave, especially if you signed a contract. It doesn't even matter. If you're Eurydice, Orpheus comes and grabs you and says, follow me, I know the way out. No, you can't leave. You can only leave if you are one of his people, you've signed a contract, you've eaten the pomegranate, you can only leave with his permission. The final thing in our description, focusing on Hades, Mr. Hades, our Darklord, in the write-ups of these domains, gives the Darklords and then describes what they call their role-playing trait, their ideal, their bond, and their flaw. And their role-playing trait is, I am the dungeon master. What is a little clue that'll help me role-play this character interacting with my PCs? The ideal is the principle that guides them. Bond is what's the thing that's most important to them. And then flaw is what it sounds like. It is what is the character flaw that is going to lead them to, like, mess up and make mistakes and be exploited.
And sometimes with this, we kind of, like, one of us will come up with a list of a whole bunch of possible quotes that could go into these categories. Other times we have a case, like with Nightmare Before Christmas, where, like, every line, Jack Skellington says he's feeling at all times. And there are just way too many quotes. This was one of the latter.
Oh, gosh.
And normally for cases like that, we each come up with one quote for trait, one quote for ideal, one quote for bond, and one quote for flaw, and we kind of, like, debate them. We couldn't do that with Hadestown.
No,
we had to each come up with two, because there are too many good
so
quotes.
many good, because it's well-written literature. So it really well expresses who this character is. And there's a lot of interconnection between things like his ideal and his flaw and his bond, because he's a well-written character. So we'll start with the role-playing trait, which, once again, is sort of, if I'm a dungeon master, my PCs have taken the dungeon to Hadestown, they're coming face-to-face with Mr. Hades, what quote is going to guide me in role-playing him? And I had two things here. And my two things, if you're okay if I just jump in and start.
Yeah.
My two things are based on the fact that there's kind of two modes Hades could take. And I know which one I'm leaning toward in terms of interacting with player characters, with the players, but here's my quotes I have. Who the hell do you think you are? Who the hell you think you're talking to?
Nice.
And that is, like, coming on strong. Don't give me any nonsense, any guff.
I actually, if I could pick, I have one that's in a very similar mode, which is, and from the same song. You're not from around here, son. Don't know who the hell you are, but I can tell you don't belong.
Ooh, that's a good one. That is a good one, yeah. And then this is him in seducer mode. This is him in charm mode. Hey, little songbird, you got something fine. You'd shine like a diamond down in the mine. The choice is yours if you're willing to choose. Like, this is him. This is the charm offensive Hades, right? This is if he's trying to charm the PCs in assigning the contract. That's what it would be, I think. The quote that would go with that.
once again, same song.
Yeah.
But I had a different tack on it, which is kind of like not so much what the trait he's presenting is kind of what his actual trait is, which is kind of just he's the boss of all bosses, and he's awesome, and he is, as they say in TV tropes, a magnificent but he's also kind of a harried pencil pusher. So I'm a busy man, and I can't stay long. I got clients to call, I got orders to fill, I got walls to build, I got riots to quell, and they're giving me hell back in Hades.
Oh, this is so hard.
I know, right?
I got 3 more of these things to do. All right. My impulse is the, aggressive.
Yeah, mine too.
Because I think players being players, they're gonna be like jerks. They're gonna be like, hey, you can't tell us what to do. We're lost. They're rude or like, Hadestown, you just stupid. And so I think they're gonna much more, even if he's being like charming at first, the immediate trigger of the who the hell do you think you are?
Yeah.
So, okay. Who the hell do you think you are? Who the hell you think you're talking to?
Versus, you're not from around here, son. Don't know who the hell you are, but I can tell you don't belong.
What do you think?
I love who the hell do you think you are, and that's one that when we're talking about Hades, we quote that a lot. We're talking about his personality, which really makes me lean toward that from the trait. But I do love the don't know who the hell you are, but I can tell you don't belong. It's the kind of it's not just the aggressive mode, it's also the possessiveness.
Yeah.
So this is my place.
Okay, yeah. So, what's the first line? I'm writing it down here for
You're not from around here, son. Don't know who the hell you are, but I can tell you don't belong.
All right, so that is our role-playing trait. Okay. Ideal. I feel like you're going to giggle because you have some things in common. So I've got kind of 2, same basic idea, same basic thing that's guiding his actions, but it's 2 different spins. And one is the focusing on Persephone, and that's when he's arguing with Persephone. He's like, Persephone, you don't like what I'm doing. I'll give my love to someone else. I'll find someone else. Someone who could love these walls and hold her close and keep her safe and think of them as my embrace. Because once again, that's his pitch, right?
Yeah.
That's his version of this story. Everything. I'd love to have the quote, I love her, everything I do for the love of you.
I have that as a possibility for Bond.
Yeah. But I love that the whole thing.
Spoiler.
That's his pitch. If he were defending himself, he would say, my walls are safety, they are security, that's what I'm doing, that's what I'm giving Persephone. That's what I'm giving to the people of Hadestown, to my children. I'm giving them safety. I'm giving them security. And that means I have to be hard sometimes. I have to be a tyrant. But it's for their own good. That these walls, they hold her close and keep her safe and think of them as my embrace. And even he calls them my children. He would say, they are my children and I am taking care of them.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And my other one is the give them a piece, they'll take it all. Show them a crack, and they'll tear down the wall, lend them an ear, and the kingdom will fall.
I had that as a possibility for Flaw.
Yes, I could see that.
Because it's the rigidity. I can't give even an inch.
Yeah.
Because if I give a piece, they'll take it all.
Right, and I picked Ideal because once again, I think that would how he would explain it. He would say, this is why I have to be the way I am, because otherwise everything will fall apart. If I give them an inch, everything will collapse.
Yeah, that's good.
What do you got?
I had for Ideal, I had the young man, you can strum your lyre. I have strummed the world in wire. Young man, you can sing your ditty. I can talk to the Electric City! And I had to put an accent to the Electric City, but it was really for the I have strung the world in wire.
Yeah.
So this is what I have done. I have strung you can strum your lyre, you can have your music, but I have strung the world in wire. I have made the world safe. I have made the world contained.
I've given it power and luxury and
control and order.
It's really good.
And then the other one... And you have to have this somewhere, because it's now I sing a different song when I can depend upon a simple tune, a steady beat, the music.
That's my flaw. That is actually, yes, that is my flaw. And that is, I think, my best my strongest candidate for flaw is that one.
I had it for Ideal because that, it's what he can depend upon. It's the thing that he wants.
It's so hard.
I love that one of your ideals is my flaw, one of my ideals is your flaw.
Once again, gets good writing, like a consistent characterization.
So I think let's put a pin in that for now,
okay.
because I feel like that means we got to use both those quotes. We're just going to decide where we're going to put them.
Okay, so then Bond. Everything and everyone in Hadestown I own.
Yeah.
But I only buy what others choose to sell. That's you got that?
I have that.
Yeah, okay.
I was debating between Bond and Flaw, but I put it in Bond. Yeah.
Because that, once again, is his... this is why it matters. This is why Hades... This is the most important thing outside of myself is the Hadestown which I possess.
Yes.
And even has the sort of his version of morality of I only buy what others choose to sell.
Yes.
Like, everyone here has signed a contract, has agreed to work for me, and that is what matters.
Yeah.
And I have, because we have and they have not, my children,
so
because
good.
they want what we have got. That's why we build the wall. We build the wall to keep us free.
So good.
And I love, this is 100%, my take on the character anyway, this is 100% what he believes. Like, he is not putting on a bit for the workers. He believes the wall keeps us free.
Yeah. I would almost say that more is ideal for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah. My other Bond was love for everything I do it for the love.
That's really good. Everything I do it for the love of you.
But I do think everything and everyone in Hadestown I own, because in his heart of hearts, that includes Persephone.
Yes, exactly.
Like
exactly.
He believes that he owns her.
She's in Hadestown.
She's in Hadestown.
And he wants her to not in Hadestown because she's in Hadestown. He owns her.
I also considered it for Flaw because
I'm cool with that for Bond then.
Yes, yeah,
okay. Because it's tricky because obviously the most important thing is Persephone.
Yes.
But all of his everything is connected with his attitudes for Persephone. Like, his attitude toward everything in Hadestown. And everyone in Hadestown is wrapped up in his psychodrama with his wife.
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna throw a new contender into the ring, because I did have a positive for Flaw. You know, there was to give a piece, he'll take it all, show a crack with it on the wall, etc. And the other thing I had for Flaw, I considered for Bond, is something for Persephone. If you want to hold a woman, son, hang a chain around her throat made of mini carat gold. Shackle her from wrist to wrist with sterling silver bracelets.
That is a flaw. That's a flaw, too.
Yeah. Because I feel like that's also his bond, that it's his bond to Persephone. It's his bond as well.
Yeah, okay, I like that. Okay, yeah. And that kind of, especially with the understanding that that's kind of his attitude toward all of his people, too.
Yeah.
That he's also kind of giving them the chains of gold. That
he is.
Yeah,
he totally is.
He's giving them... There even is a thing about, like, when Eurydice is thinking of Hadestown, she's like, oh, Hadestown, everyone wears nice clothes, everyone eats good food, everyone, like... And that's his thing, is that sort of the chains of gold.
Yeah. Oh,
that,
I like that,
the shackle...
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Hang a chain around her throat made of many carat gold, and then he's got, like... They're in chains, but the chains are, like, secure. They're not full on luxury, but they're security and stability and material, comfort. If not luxury, then at least comfort.
Yeah, okay. So, Bond.
Okay, cool. So we have left the
ideal and the flaw.
And
it's either going to be the simple tune, steady beat, music of machinery, give them a piece, they'll take it all, or everything and everyone in Hadestown I own. Those are our...
Okay, yeah, I had...
Why is it so hard?
I had flaw. Son I Too Was Left Behind, turned on one too many times. Now I sing a different song, one I can depend upon. Simple tune, steady beat, the music of machinery. Because he's specifically kind of grounding it in that whole... His jealousy and his insecurity, and I was turned upon, and, your girl left you. You gotta understand what I'm feeling. And so for me, it's that whole, this is even kind of saying this is coming out of that.
Right.
That
even he's saying that this is like a reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
That I was left behind. Like, my wife, she left me.
So
and it's that insecurity. Yeah. Like, I got control.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So you're cool with?
I'm cool with that. It's a flaw.
All right. So, ideal. Oh my God. Give them a piece. Take it all. Everything and everyone in Hadestown I own. For his ideal. What is the principle that guides him to make the decisions he makes? If I am a dungeon master...
Also thrown out for ideal, I also have the young man you can strum your lyre. I've strung the world.
Oh, yeah. It's so good. what is, like, I'm the dungeon master.
Give them a piece, they'll take it, because that's their rigidity. If you're a dungeon master and you're saying, is this pitch going to work on Hades? No, because if you give them a piece, they'll take it.
Yeah. Or that'll be his response. If they come in, the players come in and they say, like, we're trying to convince him, we'll talk about this more in a minute, like they might come in and try and convince him to be nicer, to lift the burden, to be kinder, to be better to his workers, or even better to Persephone, to let her go at the right time, let her go early. That's going to be the principle that guides his response. Is going to be the give them a piece and they'll take it all. Like, well, if I let her go early, she's never come back.
Yeah. So that's the most useful for the GM. Absolutely. Yeah.
If I get them form a union, they're gonna the whole thing's gonna collapse.
I hate that we're not doing everything and everyone in Hadestown.
I'll make it a power, don't worry.
Exactly. That's going to be the thing for turning everyone into worker bees.
I'll make it a power.
It'll be in the write-up.
It's getting in there.
Oh man, that line.
That was a hard one. Yeah. Okay. So
this is like Frollo all over again.
It really is. You should do a Hot Back Notre Dame one. Once again, if you love Hadestown, there's a very good chance you've seen Hunchback of Notre Dame. And we did a really good episode, 2-part episode about it.
Patrick Page played Frollo on Broadway.
Wow.
Well, not on Broadway. It was off-Broadway. It never made it to Broadway. There was an off-Broadway musical of Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame in which Patrick Page played Frollo. So,
There you go. So you should listen to that. That's really good.
Yeah.
That is our frankly exhaustive analysis, though we could honestly talk, talk much more about that character of our Dark Lord, Mr. Hades. But it is also worth talking about the town that is his, that is possessed by him, that is got the S apostrophe possessive of Mr. Hades, and talk about how we are imagining having Hadestown as a place you have Dungeons and Dragons adventures, in a section we like to call...
Way down Hadestown, way down under the ground. I'm sorry.
No, it's not what we call it.
The land. The land. Although it may have been possible for me to travel to Hadestown, and I certainly could have taken a mist way to the land above it, I doubted my patron would approve of me abandoning my itinerary to gallivant about on a side project. Therefore, while these tales intrigued me, I resigned myself to gathering information within Olympus. Luckily, I was able to find a woman named Alcestis, one of the few who had taken the ticket to Hadestown but returned to tell the tale. Apparently, her husband Admetus had foolishly agreed to travel to Hadestown, but fearing the tales she had heard of it, she stole his ticket and went there in his stead. Unfortunately for her husband, but fortunately for her, Mr. Hades had written up the contract for Admetus and Admetus alone, and refused to accept the signature of a thief with no respect for his laws. However, Alcestis had gotten a glimpse of Hadestown and could help me sift reality from rumor. The people of Hadestown, she told me, did have all of their material needs taken care of, but nothing more. She described a town of people moving in perfect unison, every swing of their hammers timed together like a dance, every step as synchronized as a Falkovnian military drill. They never laughed or spoke or even looked at one another, but worked as silently and efficiently as a hive of insects. I could not help but imagine Hades as a necromancer commanding an army of mindless undead servants, but Alcestis assured me that the people of Hadestown were still alive. They simply lacked everything that made living worthwhile. Mr. Hades tended to them as meticulously as a clockmaker tending to the gears in his devices, but their time in Hadestown left them as mindless as those gears as well.
So, the land of Hadestown, the domain of Hadestown, and we've got a bit of a Barovia situation here, in that we have the overall domain. Everything is Hadestown. And yet we also have a specific place called Hadestown, way down under the ground. So we're mainly going to be using that term Hadestown to refer to the specific underground city and area that Hades directly rules over. But he is our domain lord of the up top part too, the place, Act 1. He's the domain lord of Act 1 as well as Act 2.
That up top where you live it up.
Where you live it up. But so let's talk for a minute about the sort of wider, the Hadestown as domain, as overall domain. And it's kind of like a you have New York City, you have New York State, and it can be confusing. So we're imagining this has two basic components. We have an upper world and we have the underground city, and they're both under that domain name of Hadestown. There's a strong steampunk component from what we would say. We have the train, obviously, but even a lot of the imagery of industry, the image of factories and refineries and cathode rays and silver screens. Like, this is a technological society.
Oil drums and automobiles.
Exactly. I read a review of it, and it had this great description that it's between the Dust Bowl and the apocalypse. And there's a very 30s vibe. And that's partly the sort of level of technology you see. He's not making computer chips or anything. It's all stuff you could have in the 30s.
It's oil drums and automobiles.
And also just the music is so jazzy.
Yeah.
So it really has that. Even the clothing's kind of archaic. It has that kind of Great Depression Dust Bowl vibe to it. And the great thing is, D&D can do that. Like, D&D, as Keith Baker, the creator of Eberron, could tell you, D&D can do a sort of 1920s, 1930s jazz industry technology-infused setting. And we will be coming back to Eberron again, by the way. So the upper world is much more of that generic D&D setting. Like, we don't get much about the upper world, about what we're going to call on the right up top. It's a general D&D setting, but with a little more like 30s jazz infusing. And the other thing worth mentioning is it's very low magic.
Yeah.
Orpheus does what we would call in D&D terms prestidigitation.
Yeah, he goes, la, 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 and he summons up a red carnation, and Eurydice is like, the devil, you say!
What?
You can bring back spring!
And that's like a cantrip.
Yeah.
And it's a starting wizard cantrip. So that's a big deal. So that's one thing, is you have a very low magic setting, which means, of course, that your PCs are going to, like, pop. Which is always a nice thing. Your PCs are going to stand out. Your PCs are going to pop. Your PCs are going to make little red carnations appear with their cantrips, and people are going to go, what? This is also a good chance, as we're talking about the sort of overall Hadestown. Let's talk a little bit about some NPCs they might encounter. Let everybody meet the Fates.
So, with the Fates, there are a couple ways to do them, basically depending on how much you want to spell out what the dark powers are in your game. Because they've got a real dark powers vibe to them.
Yeah.
They're always tempting everybody to be their worst selves and to make terrible decisions.
And to fail.
So if you wanted to just say that the Fates are like avatars of the dark powers that are wandering around in Hadestown, you could do that and it would fit. Or if you want the dark powers to be more vague, you don't want to say, they've got actual avatars wandering around, they can just kind of be agents of the dark powers, which are absolutely a thing.
That is absolutely,
Yeah.
Long-standing Ravenloft tradition, agents of the dark powers.
I cannot believe that we are...
It's called a cross-promotion, honey.
I hate you, Mark Anthony.
Thank you for making this a part of our life. We've sat with this for so long.
I've sat with it longer than...
As of recording. Rachel is...
I'm still editing.
It's close.
I'm still editing this gosh dang episode.
It's close to being done. You can probably guess how far apart my fingers are from my tone of voice. It's close.
My life.
But to bring in a little content from what is really the dominant theme of our podcast for the last couple of months, Tower of Doom by Mark Anthony.
He should have promised her to see a fiefdom. One of the things that we did like with Tower of Doom was these, 3 Vistani women. And the idea of the Vistani as being kind of these agents of fate really works. And we're not really imagining it being like a Maiden Mother Crone thing.
Which is how it is in the book.
Yeah, Tower of Doom, very ham-handedly doesn't...
Those of you might not listen to this 4-hour nightmare.
Gosh.
You should, it's great.
If you haven't listened to this 4-hour nightmare, they have, these really obvious Maiden Mother Crone analog Vistani show up, but they're, not agents of the Dark Powers, they're fighting the Dark Powers, or something. Mark Anthony doesn't know what the Dark Powers are. It's extremely obvious. But, so... we're imagining it being more like the Weird Sisters from Gargoyles. Mark that off in your cool generational bingo card.
Beat me to it.
It's these 3 Vistani women, and they keep showing up in, different ages and different contexts, and this always seems totally normal to you. That's the key. That, at one point you see these 3 little Vistani girls walking along, and This seems totally normal. You see these, like, 3 just, like, young Vistani women, like, traveling in a group together. This is totally normal.
Right.
You see these 3 old Vistani women just kept sitting around a fire together. This is totally normal. It has nothing to do with any of this.
You're in the factory in Hadestown, and 3 of your co-workers just start talking to you in kind of a mocking voice and, like, talking about how doomed you are. And it's 3 Vistani women.
Yeah.
And this could be a very fun, you just keep mentioning this, and also keep mentioning this seems totally, like if they ask, is this weird at all? Like, no, totally normal.
Yep. And you could even take something from, once again, from the Weird Sisters and Gargoyles. With the Weird Sisters, one of them was blonde, one had white hair, and one had black hair. And it was just no matter how they showed up, they could be little girls, they could be young women, they could be old women or old gargoyles, but they always had one was blonde, one had black hair, and one had white hair. And you could do something similar with the Vistani, that they've got some distinguishing features.
Right, yeah.
Every time.
We watched the episode with our kids, and they were like, oh, it's them again! Oh, like, it totally worked for having that visual pop of these 3 girls, women, gargoyles, whatever, that always have the same 3 hair colors. And you might have already had the dark powers as part of your game, especially if you're doing something more with the older, like 2E or 3E material, where you have like dark powers checks and you have that temptation. Or with the more modern material, if you're bringing in some of the like dark powers typey stuff with the Amber Temple and everything. So you could have had the dark powers before, but it might be really nice to add that personification.
Oh, it might be really fun, actually, for if you're doing 5e, that they're like these Vistani women who are wearing all this amber jewelry.
Ooh, that's a good tell. Yeah, it's a good tell. I like that. Like, one has an amber earrings, and one has an amber necklace, and one has amber bracelets.
Yeah.
And you always just... And that your players, that's going to be creepy in a really fun way for your players.
Yeah.
And just that personification is going to feel very Hadestown. So we've added the Fates, and we've touched a whole bunch about Hades and a little bit about Persephone. Are there any other gods in the house tonight?
Mr.
Yeah. I almost forgot. So he's a really interesting figure. Once again, to have that kind of Hadestown flavor, how could you work in Hermes? Could you have Mr. Hermes as part of the story, as part of your game? And we've got some ideas.
Yeah. The big thing with Hermes was kind of cracking what he is, because he is clearly this very, like, powerful figure. And, you know, we were thinking about having him be some kind of fae, but even that didn't really seem to, like, fully encompass the role he played. But then we were thinking, you know, in the older material, in Carnival.
Bingo! Bingo for somebody, I hope.
We had Isolde being like an actual angel that was in Ravenloft. And Mr. Hermes works really well as being a good outsider. That he's, you know, we ended up picking Cardinal. You're the 5e guy.
Okay, I mean, this is not like even a 5e thing. This is an old, this is just like a crazy D&D meta plot, like the Manual of the Plains
Ravenloft.
nonsense. Yeah.
The Manual of the Plains is not a Ravenloft thing. Ergo is beyond my ken.
So you've got the various outsiders that are connected with different of the like outer planes. And from a little bit of research, because we were saying Hermes, he seems neutral good. We really zoomed in on neutral good because he wants to help Orpheus, he wants to help Eurydice, but the help is very indirect. Like, he doesn't just like hug them and poof them out to the up top. Like, he can sort of act as a go-between. He can give Orpheus confidence. He can warn Orpheus that he's about to lose Eurydice. But he does not really involve himself that much in a direct way in the story.
So he's bound by the rules, which, you know, so he's not chaotic. But also, he, like, even though a contract is a contract is a contract is a contract, he's still trying to help Orpheus get in there to save Eurydice. So neutral good seems like a really good fit.
And even like narrator, neutral good's a very narrator kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And he's kind of outsider really fit because he's like kind of half in, half out. Like, he's the narrator. Yeah, he's telling us the story, but he's also in the story. And it's like, he's not just telling us about stuff he did in the past. He kind of seems aware that he's the narrator. So we looked up the different neutral good outsiders. And we saw Averols, we saw Cardinals. And Cardinals they're kind of ego-like. They're sort of bird people. And they're specifically outsiders connected with Elysium, which is that sort of neutral good, like, domain of nature.
And we really liked that because Hermes is so close to Persephone.
Yes.
Like, when she comes, they're clearly friends. Like, she calls him brother. Like, she's complaining to him, brother, I'll be bored to death. Like,
he joshes her a little bit.
Yeah. Apparently, there's a whole lot of fanfic speculating on what exactly their relationship is like.
Wow, yeah, of course there is.
Yeah. But even the ones where it's not a romantic thing. It's like he is her oldest and best friend. Like there is, there is something like that going on, clearly.
And he does seem interested in making things better.
Yes.
Also, the fact that these Cardinals are eagle-like. Like, come on. How could we, pick anything else? We even have all the bird imagery. A man with feathers on his feet.
He wears wingtips.
Right, you could even, have he appears just as this guy in this silver suit with the little feathers. Like, that's kind of his, human guys. Little feathers on the cuffs and on the cuffs of his pants. And, yeah. So, it fits so well. And this, oh man, I love this. This is such a useful NPC. The most useful kind of NPC in the whole world for you, the GM, not for the players, is the one who's like, I'm good, I agree with you, I want to help you accomplish your goals, but I am bound by the rules, so I can help indirectly.
Yeah.
I can give you cryptic advice, or I can explain things. I can't just, grab Orpheus and bamf him into the underworld. I can tell you the way. I can tell you the path to the underworld, the back door, but I can't take you in myself. You have to go yourself. And even just as an outsider, the fact that, he shows up in Hadestown without permission, he moves in and out. As I said, that's such, for as a GM, a useful, all right, I'm going to give you some hints. I'm going to move the plot forward, but this super powerful NPC can't solve the problem for you because they're bound by the rules.
Even though, Hades doesn't bat an eye at him being there. He's ripping Orpheus a new one for being there, but he doesn't bat an eye at the fact that Hermes is there.
And that Hermes can just kind of show up. He didn't go through a long path, past barbed wire, past fences. He didn't have a train ticket. He just kind of shows up in Hadestown.
Yeah.
So that very much feels right for this kind of reality bubble, this person that's kind of not under the power of the Darklord. So, even when he's, closing the borders, Hermes can move around them.
And that is an outsider thing, that they can get around closed borders, because it's the whole, we mentioned in our Home at the Range episode, and we keep weirdly coming back to, that outsiders have, this kind of pocket domain that they carry with them. And so they can, they don't care about closed domain. They can bamf in and out.
So we've talked about the sort of general Hadestown, the domain, Barovia proper, New York State, and we've talked about some of the NPCs that are part of that general world. Let's talk about our locations. And first, as I mentioned, where they're probably going to come into, your PCs are going to come into the domain, up top. And up top, it is a farming community, and don't forget the times are hard. So the seasons are messed up. They come in, they see people are hungry, there isn't much food. You have your classic, you go to the inn and there's very scanty fare. And, you see the people, eating gruel and look hungry.
And it's the stew is so watered down.
That when the seasons are messed up, there's no spring or fall. It's just 3 months of summer. Just bam, click your heels and it's blazing hot or freezing cold. But it's 3 months of summer, and it's getting shorter every year. 3 months is lucky. It's getting under 3 months now. When Persephone is there, and they can talk about this, they can get this from the PCs. Maybe the PCs just missed it, or maybe they come on the tail end of this. When Persephone's there, things are good. There's food and there's drink and there's joy. And this the key component is of the kind of correct imbalance world that it's describing. Is there's joy and everyone shares, and things are lean, but there's enough for everyone.
Listeners, I am smiling hugely right now because we are recording this right around Christmas, and we had a real gift of the Magi situation this year, wherein Tom and I both
my podcast
said,
mic to get some hair clips. She bought an audio mixer.
So, fortunately, no one sold anything. It was just in terms of silly gift giving. But Tom and I both said, my beloved spouse is so into Hadestown right now. I should really get them working on a song, the book of behind the scenes facts of Hadestown trivia. So that was our mutual Christmas gift to one another. And one of the things that was in that book was the song Living It Up and on Top was put in there because in the kind of early stagings of it, everyone was sort of going, well, what are Orpheus and Eurydice going back to? The world on top also sucks.
Yeah, it's the apocalypse. It's the Dust Bowl.
Yeah, Hadestown sucks, but why is leaving it any better? So Living It Up on Top was there to be both, this is what they're going back to, and this was the world that they lost when Hades started, taking Persephone back earlier. So that's going to be a really, equally helpful thing for your PCs to have that as sort of a touchstone of, maybe if they arrive there at kind of the beginning of their Hadestown adventure and everything is great, and then it changes. Mm-hmm. Or, you could kind of do what we were talking about on our Hunchback of Notre Dame episode. Like, maybe they drop into Up Top during summer and have, like, a side quest that has nothing to do with anything and leave.
Ooh, I like
and then they come back, like, a couple months later and everything is awful. And they have no idea what's going on. It's explained to them, this is just how it is.
It is that kind of like the same thing that Metro was facing. Mm-hmm. You want to show your players what's lost.
Yes.
With Hades taking Persephone early. Mm-hmm. And you want to make your players care about Up Top and the people that live there, and not just to be like the jerk land of jerks. Mm-hmm. And speaking of the jerk land of jerks, so like when Persephone's there's enough, there's abundance, people are kind. Once again, that's if your PCs come in and it's like clearly there isn't that much, but everybody's sharing, and everyone's like, brother, like, what is food but food? They're gonna fall in love with that place so hard.
Though their lives are very humble, but they have to share.
Yeah, like, there isn't much, but they're all sharing the wine. Everyone's like celebrating. It's very like hippie vibe. Then they're gonna like fall in love with that place. Yeah. The idea of these people that, although they are struggling, there's enough for everyone, and they kind of have that philosophy of, as long as we share, there's going to be enough for everyone. Mm-hmm. And, everyone, we're all, if we live as brothers, then there'll always be enough.
Yeah. No one ever goes to Hadestown during the summer. There's no reason to. Like, they're down below Hadestown.
Yeah, exactly.
Down below, yeah.
So, then you have winter, which is growing. And that's times are hard, there isn't enough for everyone, and especially even have this sort of, like, to hit to Frozen, the, like, freezing of the heart, the cold heart. Like, suddenly they come back and suddenly people are mean.
Yeah.
And you get that, like, when the chips are down, suddenly people are selfish, people are mean, people aren't sharing.
The first shall be first, the last shall be last. Cast your eyes to heaven, you get a knife in the back.
That's what everyone's out for themselves, or even just everyone's, like, that sharing is gone. They're not helping each other anymore, and that's gonna, like, have an impact. If you gave them that summertime Hadestown, and then you give them the winter Up Top Hadestown, that's going to have an impact. They're going to be like, no, we should help with this. Mm-hmm. And so the big thing here in winter, which is growing, everyone is scrambling to get a ticket to Hadestown. To get the way down to Hadestown. And that's a great MacGuffin, right? Like, a ticket could be a big MacGuffin. Or you even have they find out this NPC they like they see them holding the ticket and go, no. That there's a lot of plot stuff. You have this great, like, physical thing that represents so much of somebody sacrificing so much.
Because, with Hadestown, everyone knows there's 3 hots and a cot down there. Mm-hmm. You get food, you get shelter, there's security. They know that no one who goes there ever comes back, but maybe it's because it's so great down there. So no one knows how bad it is, otherwise no one would ever go.
Yeah, speaking of that book that gave us a gift of the Magi gift-esque gift situation, it's the whole, there is that line in Way Down Hadestown where it's like everybody's, got fancy clothes and everybody's got, like, fancy food, and so maybe they've got this idea that things are better than they are.
Yeah, because when we actually see it, nobody has fancy. We don't see their food, but everyone's in overalls.
Yeah. At least according to YouTube.
Yeah.
And we don't have from personal experience.
And it was a YouTube of someone getting a perfectly legal recording of the Broadway staging, so.
So then you could even have, if you really want to hit the, like, capitalism metaphor, that, like, people believe, they hear people say, oh, I'll go to Hadestown and I'll, like, pay my dues and get a big house and, like, get nice clothes, and I'll just, like, I'll work hard and believe in myself and climb the ladder, and right, you could really play into that, like, and once again, if your players have a particular cynical mindset, they're like, oh, honey, like, no, we have to stop this. This is the greatest tragedy we can imagine. It's this, like, sweet NPC we like who believes they're going to go to Hadestown, they're going to work hard and climb the ladder.
Pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Yeah. And you might even legitimately have, I know this was a thing Rachel read about with, like, some of the backstory people came up with their characters for Hadestown. You might even have the whole people sending money back. Mm-hmm. And that could be a thing, right? They do get paid. Like, there's a job in Hadestown.
Yeah.
And it is a hellscape. But you could even have, like, oh, you come back to Up Top, And, like, the nice, barkeep's brother went to Hadestown while they were gone, the PCs were gone, and has, like, been sending back money. Mm-hmm. And, like, that's legitimately a thing you can do until you forget they exist.
Yeah.
Which we've touched on. Mm-hmm. It's not useful for economic production to send money back to your family up top.
So something, they get money back for, like, the first month, and then it dries out.
And that's a great plot hook. That's what we'll talk about later. That's a good, like, plot hook they could follow is my brother went to Hadestown and was sending, like, really good money back for about a month, 2 months, but it stopped. And they're not answering my letters. And that's immediately like, ding, 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 plot.
Yeah.
So then we have the big show, the thing we're really all here for.
Uh-huh.
Which
we
is...
basically segued into it already.
Hadestown proper, the Neon Necropolis. Did you think you'd be impressed?
We love the show so much.
It is an industrial hellscape. It is all underground. There may be like huge Mines of Moria-esque caverns, right? Like, but still, it's under the ground. Yeah. Just everything is controlled. Everything is walls and machines. Everything is work and then sleep. Like, mark off Star Wars. You got that on your bingo card. If you saw the show Andor, which if you like Hadestown, there's a good chance you'll like Andor.
If you can make it through the first 5 episodes.
So,
I'm sorry, most people say the first 2. I say the first 5.
Yeah, Rachel wasn't a huge fan.
I was not a huge fan until this plot line.
But there's this prison, and it's this great prison. It's just they're doing prison work. And there's this wonderful, like, they're not being beaten. The guards are barely there. All of their physical needs are cared for. They have, showers. They have rooms. There's no, like, physical danger.
No limit on the food.
No, unlimited, like, protein paste. You can have as much protein paste as you want. And they're even like, if you're sick, talk to us. You can have sick days. Like, we don't want people to spread diseases. And we're not going to waste workers that are sick. We give them a couple days, send them to the clinic, and then they're back to work. Mm-hmm. But everyone is just a cog in a machine. And sort of that is Hadestown.
The line that they have in there is, we're cheaper than droids.
Yes. All of your physical, unlike up top, all of your physical needs are cared for. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that is, Mr. Hades is completely, legitimately correct. That part of the contract, all of your physical needs are cared for. You have a bed, you have physical, you don't have to worry about cold, you don't have to worry, you probably have healthcare.
You definitely don't have to worry about cold. Why is it so hot down here?
But you don't have to worry about the cold, you have a soft bed to fall into every day, and you have all the food you can, your belly's never empty. You're never, like, growling with hunger. Your physical needs are all taken care of, but that is it. Mm-hmm. You have no other existence, no other relationships. You don't even have other identity after long enough. You're cheaper than a droid.
Yeah.
You exist to be a cog in a machine. And a good machinist, a good engineer, will take good care of their cogs, right? Mm-hmm. You oil your cogs, you sharpen them, you fix the broken ones, but that's all they are. Yeah. You're a cog in a machine. Which brings us to our one really interesting location in Hadestown, and that is Our Lady of the Underground. And this is kind of a speakeasy that Persephone runs. Mm-hmm. So she runs this underground club. It's technically illegal. It's technically against the rules. We don't know how much Hades knows. Maybe he knows and doesn't care. Maybe he doesn't know. And the line they keep coming back to is there's a crack in the wall, which was the original title of Hadestown. There's a crack in the wall. There's one thing in Hadestown that's not like your dorm room, the cafeteria, the showers, or your job. Mm-hmm. That's not the prison. And that is this bar, basically.
And this is where the fact that we have only seen the very, very poorly filmed bootlegs, slime tutorials, is coming back to haunt us. Because, lady, given your giant crush on Amber Gray, you could have filmed this scene better. This is her big breakout number. But it wasn't clear to us whether there's a literal crack in the wall,
right,
or whether it's kind of saying that, like, narcotics are this false escape. Mm-hmm. And that, like, she talks about having the moon on pay-per-view. Like, is this actually, like, you get to go and look at the moon if you pay money? Or is it, like, she has peep shows, and it's like, no, this is your escape, this kind of, like, seeing
the book we've referenced a couple times. It's become an amusing anecdote in our marriage. There was the original title was A Crack in the Wall. And the original idea was there is a crack in the wall, and she has one of those, like, Empire State Building, like, viewfinders. Like, you put a coin in, it's like binoculars. Mm-hmm. And you drop your coin in, and you can see the crack in the wall and you can see the stars. So that was the original, like, that was sort of set up, and there were versions of it that had, like, that on the stage during Our Lady of the Underground. But it was too obvious and literal. And so that was a version of it, but we don't know what it is in Hadestown. And if you have seen Hadestown,
please let us know.
Let us know. We would love to know, just for our own understanding of the musical. Also support us on Patreon because you can afford it. Right? Like,
unless your family bought you tickets, in which case you have
they should support us on Patreon. Have them get you a Patreon for Christmas. All right? Those tickets ain't cheap.
Tom knows how to hustle.
I get paid.
And with Our Lady of the Underground as a, like, useful setting for the PCs, there were earlier drafts where, like, Orpheus was hiding out in Our Lady of the Underground, and Persephone was sheltering him there. So if you wanted to have them, like, have this previous relationship with Persephone, then that could be a thing that they do. You know, obviously they didn't have time to get into that and explore that there. The musical would have been 3 hours long, so they couldn't have Orpheus hide there.
Which we would have loved.
Yeah.
But
you know, with your PCs, you can do that. So you can really get into all this stuff.
This is a super useful location because I love this about this setting. That as soon as your PCs are in Hadestown Underground, they have a target on their back. Like, the plot happens. They can't wander around and just, like, go shopping. Like, as soon as they're there, there's a target on their backs, and they stand out, and they...
Hades doesn't know who the hell they are, but he knows they don't belong.
Right, they don't have papers. They don't have ID. They're not wearing fashionably distressed coveralls. They're not workers. Like, they immediately are going to be under observation, under threats, maybe people trying to turn them in for favors. And so the plot happens immediately. Like, there's no engage. As soon as they go into this location, they engage with the plot. And this could be the kind of home base hideout. This is like the one place they can go where they're not going to be immediately arrested. And if they go to the fashionably distressed coverall store, they're going to maybe get arrested, but like not here. So even just the fact this is a speakeasy, they're going to like read that as a place where people are critical of Hades, where people break the laws. This is like the one place they can hide out.
And we also, since this is the idea of like seeing the sky and seeing the moon and everything, there's the possibility that you can have here that the workers in Hadestown, when they come here and when they're drinking the fruit of the vine, they might remember a little bit of who they used to be. And, you know, when they wake up in the morning, you know, it's just a drunk dream like everything else that they might have dreamed that night. But at the time, they probably don't remember the whole of it, but like Eurydice, for instance, could be like, what was his name? Oh, he had the most beautiful voice. Oh, I loved him so much. What was his name? You know, she could remember more of that.
And this is the place that is going to draw them. Like, you don't have to tell them to go here if they're like, oh, everyone's looking at us weird and calling the police and we're not wearing the same clothes as everyone else. And then somebody kind of pulls us in an alley and hands us a scrap of paper and says, it's speakeasy, you know, we can talk there. Like, they're just going to go there.
Yeah.
And this is like the place they can relax and have like role-playing scenes where you don't have to be rolling for initiative.
Yeah.
Every scene, non-stop rolling for initiative.
Make me stealth again.
Make me stealth, not wrong. Wins some insight, he's calling the police. Like, this is the place that's going to naturally draw them and kind of be their home base in Hadestown. And they can meet Persephone, and they can talk to people that are doing something illegal, so they're willing to criticize Hades. This is where you can have that whole, like, the power plant, I work there, I suppose I could sneak you in, kind of scene happen. So this is an incredibly important location for PC interaction with the hellish industrial police state of Hadestown. And so we have a lot of cool locations, including ones especially important for you, Our Lady of the Underground, in this hellish industrial police state of Hadestown.
And we've already kind of started talking about some of the possible ways your PCs could hook in.
Right. But what would bring your PCs to that hellish industrial police state? Rachel, what do you do with it?
Dread possibilities. It seemed that I had gathered as much information about Hadestown as was possible without visiting it personally, so I set about preparing for the next leg of my journey. I enjoyed one final meal in Olympus before departing, and it is with great reluctance that I admit that the blue-haired huckster Hades of this domain was correct. The lamb was delicious. As I ate, 3 old Vistani women wearing identical gray dresses and amber jewelry sat across from me at the table. I confess that at the time, nothing seemed odd about them joining me. Alcestis didn't tell you about the wall, said the first of them. What wall? I asked her. Oh, none of them told you? Asked the second. That's what they're working on down in Hadestown. They're building a wall, high and thick. The wall keeps them free. The wall keeps out the enemy, said the third, but her voice sounded like my own. The version of my voice that I hear in my own mind, as my own thoughts. The wall keeps out the enemy. Suddenly, I saw Hadestown in a new light. I have no need for food or shelter, but Hadestown offered more than that. Hadestown offered safety. One of the old women began toying with her amber jewelry, and I could see, flashing in her hand, a pair of coins. The coins for the ferryman. The coins that would take me somewhere with a strong wall to protect me, to keep the death and darkness and fear away from me forever. My ring of protection went cold on my finger, and I saw something dark and dead moving under the skin of the women's faces. The 3 women. The 3 witches. With a scream, I leaped to my feet and hurled an eldritch blast at them, but they were already gone, their laughter echoing in the air around me. I didn't realize that I had summoned my form of dread until I saw the inn's patrons cowering in terror. Flushing, I grabbed my things and made a hasty retreat.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
Well, nothing comes of wishing on stars.
Get a job, Belle. Pay for your books. Wouldn't tolerate that crap in Hadestown. So, what brings your PCs to Hadestown other than you're a big musical theater nerd and you've been practicing your really deep, rumbly Hades voice? So, what could make PCs choose to come to Hades? We touched on this a little bit already. I really like this idea you're saying of having it be this kind of multiple, you come there in summer and then you come there in winter.
Yeah.
But what made them come there in summer or winter?
Well, the same thing that makes actual people up top go to Hadestown,
Yes.
which is like money, commerce, deliveries.
Yeah.
Like, this is... I don't think I'm going to mention this in Incorporated, because I'm just going to geek out and mention it here. This is like Paradon was in the older material for my fellow grognards. It was like, the domain that had very little of its own farmland, so it was entirely dependent on imports from other domains. Mm-hmm. And with up top, it does have farmland. It is a farming domain, but only 3 months out of the year.
Yeah.
So most of the time, they desperately need commerce.
Right.
They desperately need those trade caravans.
Yeah, baby! Mark the bingo card! Trade caravans!
So, you could be bringing in the trade caravans that are bringing stuff in, or if you're going in during the summer, then you could be hard to be helping a trade caravan come out because they're desperately trying to get some money back in for when the times get hard. They're, growing wheat, and they're thinking, well, maybe, I can send some of this out and get some money and see what happens from that.
I love this because it could even get you into Hadestown, like, conditionally, if you could have, you're just escorting a food caravan. Because you can totally imagine there aren't giant, like, hydroponic gardens in Hadestown, but the workers have to eat. Yeah. So, he certainly makes enough stuff to export and sell. So you have these, like, the train. You've got your passenger cars, but then you've got just, like, boxcar after boxcar, hopper car after hopper car, full of wheat, full of that month's food supply for the workers. And so you kind of are involved with that, and maybe you even get to, like, ride the train in, see the industrial hellscape, but then, like, ride the train back out and, like, oh no, we should do something.
Speaking of industrial hellscape making you say, oh no, we should do something. If you have a druid or a ranger or a cleric with a nature domain in your party, you could really punch them in the druid. They're going to have some kind of vision of nature being out of balance. They're going to have, like, some animal or fae or something comes to them from up top and tells them this tale of woe, and that's really going to hook them in.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is a great, like, it's not even just like nature is out of balance because people are polluting. It's like, nature's out of balance because the gods of this world that represents different aspects of nature are out of balance. And their relationships out of balance. The gods have forgotten the song of their life.
Yeah. But kind of the biggest hook, of course, is to be Orpheus.
Yes.
Is that you have a Eurydice somewhere, and Hadestown, the great thing is you can have it be that there's this story of Hadestown, the place where you go, and all of your material needs are taken care of. It can be an urban legend that's whispered of in every domain. And the train could be going to every domain like Sire 1313, just picking people up who have a ticket and taking them to Hadestown. So, you could have somebody in Falcavania. They sure would love to have a cot. You could have, like, your nice NPC who you met there who's just trying to survive, and you find out that she's in Hadestown now. Once again, she was sending money back to her family, but things have gotten real bad.
It could just be a really cool, like, you're in Darkon, and they're struggling, and there's these, like, stories about this place called Hadestown, and your Broadway nerd PC's like, oh no!
This is bad.
And, like, then they show you they have a ticket, and they just go to a place, and then the train appears and takes them, and that's, like, that's gonna be cool.
Yeah,
that's gonna be a cool scene.
Yeah. Although if you're doing old Darkon, then Ezzelin does try to make sure that his people are taken care of, because the heart of the king loves everything, as the hammer loves the nail.
Yes, which sadly had to be cut, for sure.
Man, it was a great line. So that is like the strongest hook, is to have a Eurydice for your Orpheus. We're going to get more into that later.
We haven't talked much about Orpheus and Eurydice, and it's because the Orpheus is the PC, and Eurydice is sort of the PC. We didn't have to kill them this time.
Yes.
We just had to not have them in the show. Your PCs are Orpheus. They could have Eurydice.
Yeah. This could be long after or long before the Orpheus and Eurydice thing happens. Or it doesn't happen at all. So, yeah. And then another possibility is if you're having Hermes as this outsider, he's not just going to be bound to Hadestown, he's going to be everywhere. So he can be this like recurring NPC who's kind of showing up and cryptically helping the party as things go. And then...
Man, just how cool. Got guy in a slit guy in a silver suit named Mr. Hermes.
Mr. Hermes.
And they're all like, oh, geez. All your classical nerd PCs.
And then one day he shows up and he asks for a favor for a friend. Especially, again, if there is, like, if you're having actual Orpheus and Eurydice, then Orpheus is like a son to Mr. Hermes in play. So that could, if you wanted to bring in Orpheus as an NPC, then Hermes could be the one who brings them in.
Like, there is up top in this domain proper, but the wonderful thing is that can just be Ravenloft. That can be the other domains are up top. That can be, like, Hadestown is just the underground city and the train.
Yeah.
And the train we even have, if you're bringing the old stuff with Mistways, that there is, like... this Mistway nexus is sort of this train station.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the idea of there's this mysterious train. And it would even be the thing that's exporting all the stuff from Hadestown. This mysterious train, once again, like Sire 1313, will just show up in Barovia and just sell Strahd a whole bunch of oil drums for whatever reason he needs them. And, like, load up grain from the Barovian fields and ship it back to Hadestown. But also the occasional dispossessed Barovian peasant will have their ticket somehow and get on the train.
Hop on the train, yeah.
And... then you have that, and then it can be, you kind of get engaged with this Hadestown story wherever your PCs are going. They can have this in the background.
And for Hermes being kind of this, like, wandering do-gooder outsider, if you're doing the older material, we're going to talk about this more in the incorporating section, you could have Isolde filling the same role, and we'll talk about that more later. But you very much fits the, that she's this chaotic good figure. She's going to want to kind of see these things repaired. So if you want to kind of, like, conflate Mr. Hermes and Isolde into the same character, you could.
Absolutely, yeah. And so once that gets you there, and maybe that even just any of these domains could be up top, and you're already there, and you don't even know it yet. But then what do you do in that descent into Hadestown? We have that classic descent to the underworld, that core story. And whatever the story is going to involve going into Hadestown and coming out again. It's going to involve in some way being the Orpheus.
Yes.
So you kind of have two core plots that are related in the show, because it's good. And one is you're trying to restore Spring. So this is that whole, if you have up top as its own place, you have the PCs care about it, you have the PCs want to help the people there who shared, like, food and wine with them. Or even the PCs like Persephone, and they hear that her jerk husband kidnapped her. And they just want to help Persephone get back where she wants to be up top.
He missed her.
So one of our core ideas is they could be trying to go down into Hadestown to get Persephone and restore Spring. And the other is that Orpheus, her Persephone, we've touched on a couple examples of this. They're trying to bring somebody back. Like, maybe it's somebody's cousin. Maybe it's an NPC's cousin. Maybe it's an NPC's brother. Maybe it's an NPC they like. Maybe it's an NPC that's friends with Hermes. But somehow the PCs need There's someone they've discovered is in Hadestown, and things are bad, and they're suspicious, and they're not getting letters anymore, or money anymore, and so the PCs are like, we need to go rescue this person.
Yeah.
So pretty much Hadestown.
Yeah. And we're trying to come up with what the adventure was. We realized just a really elegant way to combine these two things is that if you just tweak Hades' motivations and his knowledge of what's going on.
It's all you.
This is all me. Yes,
It's
I'm
all
very
you.
proud of this. I'm very proud of this. If you tweak his motivations and his awareness of what's going on a teeny bit, it's really easy to combine these two, because the whole thing is that Orpheus is trying to write a song that will bring back spring, right? And for those of you who haven't seen the musical, for regular listeners who are just like Disney people and not Broadway people, Orpheus is working on a song to bring back spring. And, meanwhile, coincidentally, like Hades being mad at Persephone kind of goes up top and sees Eurydice and is all like, oh, I'm going to bring this new girl down to make Persephone jealous. And like he does that, and that's kind of what kicks it off. And you could really easily make that not be a coincidence.
Yes.
You could have it be that Orpheus is writing this song to try to bring back spring. Well, bringing back spring means taking Persephone out of Hadestown, means taking Hades' property, which is his wife, because that's the kind of guy he is, away from him. And so Hades is going to react by taking Orpheus' wife away from him. And that is what Orpheus gets for having no respect for property. So you could very easily hook the PCs in to begin with by having it be this, like, they're coming in because they care about these people, because they've seen how good things are in spring and now things are bad in winter, and they're trying to figure out how to bring spring back. And Hades is like, oh, heck no. And so he finds some NPC in any domain that the PCs care about, and goes to them.
It's Eurydice.
Yes, he goes to them with his pitch. She or he gets Eurydice, or they get Eurydice, and the PCs have to try and go down into Hadestown and bring them back.
Way down under the ground.
Yes,
that's so good. Do this story, basically.
Yes.
This is good.
I was so proud of that.
And the key here is that much like in Hadestown, it's a social boss fight. It's a role-play encounter. It's performance checks. It's persuasion checks. Like, the PCs might even think they're going in to have a boss fight with Hades, but no, you can't. You can't beat Hades into submission.
Although
he has infinite hit points.
The great thing is you do get your combat encounters along the way. You can fight Cerberus and the guards.
No, we're going to have to leave combats here.
Yeah.
But the core, the boss fight, is you have to persuade Hades to loosen his grip. And it might be loosening his grip on an NPC. It might be loosening his grip on Persephone. It might be both. But either way, the nice thing is, with the structure of the torment, the metaphysics of the torment, this doesn't contradict that. And maybe it's like, oh, he's going to loosen his grip on Persephone and let her leave for spring, but it's going to make him more jealous next year.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing. Since the torment is the overall thing, you could have the occasional... This is not like a Strahd getting over Tatiana. This is
Strahd trying to let Tatiana go for one reincarnation.
Yeah.
But then the next reincarnation, he's
hungrier. He's thirstier.
More after her, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, this can still be part of the torment, and it can still be even like they're sort of surfing the dark powers will, because they're going to make Hades more jealous. But they could still win this battle. Yeah. They can, like, this year, there can be spring. And there can be, like, 6 months of... There can be, like, the proper 6 months of Persephone.
Because can't you just see Strahd being like, I'm gonna let Tatiana just be with whatever... Live her life. And won't she be so grateful to me next reincarnation? Don't I deserve that gratitude?
Yeah, what a good guy I am.
I'm such a nice guy.
So our core story is Hadestown Act 2. It's the journey in the underworld, a journey out of the underworld, and then the boss fight. But the boss fight is actually a boss conversation, or possibly a boss sing-off.
This was literally made for your Bard.
It was, yeah. Go do it, Bard. Sing a song about him.
Get it!
So the last thing I like to talk about in this section is like to talk about different variations. We always have the same two. We do, which is our aging down, our aging up. If you have 10-year-olds that love Hadestown, which would be weird, so don't do that. No, like, there's not really an aging down here.
And even, like, I mean, in as much as there is aging down, it's kind of like what it is in the musical itself. That like
Hadestown.
Hey, little songbird it's all bird metaphors, but you know what they're actually singing about?
Yeah, we don't have a younger audience-facing version of this setting other than just do Hadestown.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the darker elements we've included don't necessarily include those.
Yeah.
But our aging down is do Hadestown.
If you have a younger kid who's really into Hadestown and you have thoughts here, let us know.
Yes.
Our 13-year-old is into Hadestown, but he, is cool with doing just
We would just do a setting of Hadestown. But we have a lot of options when it comes to aging up.
Yeah.
Speaking of.
We can do a quick skip ahead warning, actually, not so much in terms of for your kids, because we can talk about it vaguely, but just in terms of content warning stuff that you might not want to listen to.
Yeah.
There's
vis-a-vis little songbirds.
Vis-a-vis little songbirds, and there being a lot that goes on behind closed doors. So if you don't want to hear about what goes on behind closed doors, future Rachel's going to jump in now. So the first part of this is just talking about the psychological horror memory loss aspect. And then there's a pretty obvious transition where I say something like, the other thing, and it's pretty clear we're talking about something else. You're going to want to skip ahead about 2 minutes from that point if you don't want to hear about the possibility that Hades and Eurydice had a physical relationship and she was not the first. Normally we give an exact timestamp, but since we have a director's cut here, the timestamps are going to be different depending on whether you're a patron or not. So the two big things with aging up, first off, are the playing up the memory loss and the identity horror. And you don't get that as much in the musical. You get flowers, and it's very sad. But, as soon as she sees Orpheus, she remembers Orpheus. You don't really get the horror of her forgetting Orpheus.
Talk about the two, the brother and sister characters that you read about.
So there was, this is from TV tropes, so, it could be wrong here. But
What if it isn't?
Yes. So the ensemble, they come up with the backstory for who their characters are and how they ended up in Hadestown, like you do, because that's just how you can play it. And I don't remember what their relationship was between the actor and the actress. It was the actor and the actress were very close. And they felt like that was really coming across in their interactions with each other on stage. And so the backstory they came up with was she was his older sister. And she had, their family had been hungry because everyone's hungry.
Yeah, that's how it is, up top.
And so she went down to Hadestown to try and, just get food and also to send money back. That was kind of where that was coming from. And then, her brother, he stayed up top with their parents, but then their parents died. And she was all he had left. So he wanted to go down and find her again, and he went down. And just like Eurydice with Orpheus, she remembered him when she saw him for a week, but then they both forgot each other. And they remembered that they were something to each other, but they didn't remember what. And if you want to get weird with that, you can for aging up. Or it could just lead to some real, psychological horror.
Especially if the PCs recognize these two as this brother and sister. And now they don't remember. They're friends. They're drawn to each other, but they don't remember each other at all. And that's the tragedy of that.
Yeah.
And if they know that second one, that brother, went to Hadestown because that's where his sister was and that's all the family he had left. And now does not remember anything.
Yeah. Or there was, it was so creepy, and it did such a good job of, conveying how much they're being turned into cogs in the machine, that, Eurydice would be, having her drama with Orpheus, and then the other Hadestown workers would start doing, their worker choreography, and Eurydice would just, get pulled away from Orpheus and start doing the worker choreography with him.
And that's cool.
And that's so cool. And she wasn't involved in the beatdown, but she could have been.
Yes, which once again, good stuff.
You can just see the Hades gives the order, and this NPC who your PCs love, their eyes go blank, and they start beating the tar out of
Oh, it's gonna be so good.
Yeah.
That's horror, baby. That's memory loss identity horror, baby.
Yeah.
And just they're like, we don't want to fight this person. I'm not going to cast Fireball on Sally the barmaid.
Yes.
We had this sweet little flirty relationship with our light cleric.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one way to just, with the aging up older people, you really want to engage with the potential existential horror of this setting.
Yeah. The other thing is the thing that we were referring to. With
you need a content warning for existential horror.
Yeah. So there is, they don't come out and say anything happened with Hades and Eurydice, like Patrick Page, the original Hades actors, were like, yes, it totally did.
Yeah.
But they don't come out and say that it happened. It totally happened.
Yeah.
And you could have Hades being so much worse.
Yeah.
And again, this was in earlier drafts a thing. Hades was just, Eurydice was the latest in a long line of girls that he brought down to Hadestown with promises of like just
fur coats and nice cars and
shackle her from wrist to wrist with sterling silver bracelets. And then he lost interest in them because they weren't Persephone. And so if you wanted to make Hades so much worse, you could do that.
Even in the play, there was the line where she's like, "I'm different," and the Fates say they all thought they were different.
Yeah.
And that can be very much like, no, you're just the latest in a long line of special girls,
of
little songbirds, that he's brought down to Hadestown, and you sang for him, and now he's done with you. So now you're on the factory floor, and
you wait from his hand. And
So that is the potentially much more adult thing you could bring in, especially, we are, as a Dark Lord, going with a more villainous spin on Hades. And once again, the book we've mentioned, Anais Mitchell even talks about the sort of difficulty of balancing. She wants Hades to be a character that's sort of redeemed at the end, and fundamentally you like feel for, but that was a very tricky balancing act.
Yeah, which is probably why she had to cut all that stuff, because I would not have been on board with Hades in that case.
So we always have the aging down, we always have the aging up, but I have an additional variant to add. I'm talking about Eberron. If you are one of those people that clicked on this because it was about Hadestown, you love Hadestown, you're kind of vaguely following this Dungeons and Dragons talk, thank you for your service, and thank you for being with us. This is going to get real in the weeds.
I'm not going to understand a word of this either, if it helps. If it's not Ravenloft or Dragonlance, I'm out.
People that are like Eberron people, like, yes, I'm oversimplifying a lot, but just imagine that person I described right now, and I'm trying to make this in any way comprehensible to them.
He's trying to make it comprehensible to me, listeners.
Eberron is a Dungeons and Dragons setting. It's one of the worlds that they make books for in Dungeons and Dragons. And it's different. Most of the others are sort of random Ren Fair medieval fantasy, right? Like the movie, if you saw, which you should, it's great. Eberron, part of the pitch was it was a more steampunk. Yes, I know it's not technically steampunk. Just go with it. It's a more steampunk setting. So it's a place where there is much more magic has become technological. So you have like airships powered by captured air elementals. So you have this version of the train called the lightning rail. That's basically magically powered. Or you have like magical robots, basically. And so they're going for a much more 1920s, 30s, trying to bring in a lot of like noir mystery as an element too. They're going for much more of that like Magitech flavored 1920s, 1930s kind of setting. And so there's an obvious connection there with Hadestown, right? Like, in Eberron, they have trains. In Eberron, they have factories. In Eberron, they have refineries. They have power grids. In Eberron, someone could conduct the electric city. But also, what really makes Eberron useful as a potential source of Hadestown. I'm going to have a variant sidebar. The idea that Hadestown, before it came into Ravenloft, was in Eberron. Because in Eberron, you have the world of Fae, the world of the fairy, and the idea is these sort of like fairy domains have an archfey, and they're all based on stories. That's sort of, they're the world of stories, of fairy tales, basically. And that really fits this, because this also starts with a story. It's a myth, and it is, as they said, that core story, the cycle of the seed and the sickle. So you could even imagine, like, if you had a world where stories would create these kind of pocket domains, Hades and Persephone would be one of them. Because that would be that story that explains summer and winter and life and death and the planting and the harvesting and all of that sort of in that cycle of the seasons and that cycle of life. That's the story that explains that really core part of human existence. So I'm imagining in Eberron, you had one of those Fae domains. I'm going to call them Fae Spires. That's not technically correct. Just go with it. The Fae Spire is this kind of land that is based on this story. But then they've mentioned in Eberron that if the story changes, the Fey domain changes too. That they are the sort of manifestation of the stories. And so that's what happened here.
So mage.
Yeah, it's very mage. The story changed. And maybe it was the story changed because of industrialization, because we have this magical industrialization. Maybe it changed because this terrible war happened, this sort of Eberron equivalent of World War I happened. Maybe it changed because Hades changed, right? That very much that like, well, wait, if the Fey domain changes, does that change the story? Or does the story change the Fey domain? Yes.
Yes.
Right? It's an impossible cause and effect to untangle. It's something happened that you had this Fey domain, this Fey spire in Eberron that was Hades and Persephone, that was an underground world and an above ground world, and they were in harmony and they were in balance. And they were the cycle of the seed and the sickle. And then something black and dark and afraid moved into Hades' heart. And everything got messed up and it got pulled into Ravenloft. So thank you for that Eberron sidebar. I'm sorry, that was a lot of Dungeons & Dragons nonsense words.
I love you very much.
But it just fits so well, the conception of the Fey Spires in Eberron, and it fits so perfectly that you had this really powerful archetypal myth story, and then that archetypal myth story got corrupted.
And even the idea that Orpheus is trying to restore the previous archetypal myth story, and that your PC's being Orpheus in this.
Trying to restore the older story, trying to bring the story back into harmony, trying to bring the world back into rhythm. So, thank you. The end. This concludes my talk on Eberron.
This concludes your Tom Talk.
Yes, this concludes my Tom Talk. But if you're running Eberron, you're welcome. This is great. You can do Hadestown. Aren't you glad you listened to my podcast? So, we've talked about, for younger players, which is do the show. Older players do versions of the show. Eberron players do the Eberron show. And let's conclude all of those variants of the show with parting thoughts in a section we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So the first thing we like to do in Parting Thoughts is talk about the genre of horror. This is from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which for our Hadestown listeners, if you're still with us, bless you. This is the big current Dungeons & Dragons kind of guide to running horror games. And they talk about these different genres of horror, and for each of these kind of evil horror movie reality bubbles, like this one we've made of Hadestown, they give some of the genres of horror, because that helps you kind of figure out how you want to run it, how you want to evoke the horror, what are the aesthetic signifiers, you know, gothic horror versus body horror, very different things. Yeah. So we both really love that section. I think it's really useful even if you are just, you know, running any kind of horror game or making any kind of horror story. So we like to start with that. And I have two pretty clear...
I have one pretty clear, so I'll start and you can tell me what your other one is, because I'm sure that my one is one of your two.
Yeah, fire away.
Disaster horror.
Disaster horror, yes.
100%.
Disaster horror. It's almost, we have these two spheres, these two sections of the domain. And disaster horror is a huge theme. You're gonna have it the most present in the up top.
Yeah.
Because that is basically a post-apocalyptic or
dystopia.
Apocalyptic
like
world. It's a world that is undergoing a kind of slow motion apocalypse. And a lot of the tropes of disaster horror, you know, you have want, you have privation, and even you have the, like, people turning on each other when the chips are down. You have that suddenly nobody's friendly anymore, nobody's sharing anymore, you can't trust anyone. That paranoia, that kind of paranoia of people getting mean. People get mean when the chips are down.
Yeah.
And the chips are down.
But even down below, like, not as much, but you've got, because Hades is way cooler than the governor from The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
But he has similar DNA to the governor from The Walking Dead. The governor from The Walking Dead even talks about how important their walls are.
Yeah.
And, like, this is very much, he fits the type of someone who has taken power during a disaster horror story.
Yes.
And has kind of leveraged that to make himself an absolute ruler.
Absolutely. No, 100%. That we have that, the most clear, they're like people wandering around with shotguns and axes and fighting over tins and beans is going to be in the up top. But yes, Hadestown, as they are imagining it, is very much a disaster horror setting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that same premise of this is this closed community where physical needs are taken care of, but because of that fear and because of that want, a dictator has taken power. Mm-hmm. And the dictator uses that fear and that want as a kind of, a whip to drive the people, or as a justification for the things they're doing. Mm-hmm. And in this case, we could even say on some level, Mr. Hades legitimately believes what he's doing is what's best for everyone. But the point is, why does he need to treat his people the way he does?
Why does he build the wall?
Why does he build the wall? Is because the outside world is so bad.
Yeah. Because the enemy is poverty.
Yeah, there's so much hunger, there's so much want, there's so much need on the outside world. He needs to have this absolute control and absolute security of his town for his children.
Yeah.
His children.
So that was the only one where I was like, yes. to this, absolutely. I had a couple other possibilities, but nothing that I really was in love with. So what's your other one?
It's a psychological horror.
Yeah.
And that's specifically for the Hadestown, the memory loss, and the loss of identity.
I was debating between, as often happens, I was debating between psychological and cosmic. Because with psychological, there's the memory loss, there's the, losing yourself, getting taken over by Hades, being a cog in the machine. As opposed to the cosmic, this is the way the world is, this is the way the universe is broken and cannot be fixed, and that's very cosmic horror. But I think you're right, psychological is the way to go.
Psychological for me specifically, because it doesn't just happen because it's the way the universe is, it happened because of Hades. This happens because you signed the contract.
Yeah.
Hades is doing this to you.
Yeah, that's fair, because I kind of was falling into cosmic because in Hadestown as written, Hades is a god and Persephone is a god and this is the universe. But the version we're doing, they're just fae. So, you're right, that turns it into psychological.
Yeah. Or even when you bring the gods to that kind of Greek myth level of just really powerful people, or there isn't really that sort of Ovid. They're just powerful jerks with magic. I feel that technically, if they're gods, it's cosmics, it's the universe. But for me, it's no, that feels more like it's just a powerful wizard. And the fact that Hades is a god, but he could just be a powerful wizard. Yeah, and it would be the same effect.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned, with powerful wizards is a potential replacement in our Hercules one. So that's why I would come down on psychological. And even if this is happening to some people, not other people. This is not going to be happening to the PCs. Yeah. Unless you want it to happen to the PCs, which would be kind of cool. Might be kind of cool and dark.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because with our other Hades domain, which was a Hercules episode, we had it that it's the domain of Greek tragedy, and it's happening to everyone. And it's cosmic horror because everyone is getting pulled into this world of tragic fate. Whereas in this, it's only specifically the people who do this thing. So psychological, totally. Yep.
So the next thing we'd like to talk about is what kind of game to run here. You have some of these settings, like your nerdy Dungeons & Dragons friends might have mentioned, Barovia, Curse of Strahd, that Strahd guy we mentioned. And that is, as they may have told you, a really long game.
Yes.
That is months and months and months and months and months of playing.
Possibly years.
You could do years of playing if you added some stuff in and you took your time. And so, of course, as you can imagine, it means there's lots of plot hooks. There's lots of events. There's lots of NPCs. There's lots of just threads to interact with. Then there's other of these settings that are really made for one adventure. So, on the theme of the railway line to hell, there is a setting that's called Sire 1313, which is basically a ghost train. And you know what? You don't do years on the ghost train.
Yeah. There's only so much you can do on a train.
Snowpiercer's under 2 hours. It's...
He'll be a happy choo-choo train until the day he dies, which is not going to be long from now because your PCs are going to come.
Right. It's like this ghost train reality bubble domain exists to basically have one adventure. Your nerdy friends are going to meet and maybe one sitting, 2 sittings, 3 tops. They're going to go through the ghost train, fight ghosts, and then get to the front where the boss ghost is and fight the boss ghost and maybe suplex the engine. Yeah. So that is, in this, I think, this setting, Hadestown, with a space between Hades and Town, by the way. Legally covering our bases.
Similar to, but legally distinct from.
So, a town that belongs to the public domain Greek mythology character of Hades. So...
Red carnations are public domain.
Yeah, right? You can't copyright a red carnation. It's her fault for not having a more distinctive logo. So...
like a sad girl in front of a French flag.
Yes. We couldn't touch that. But this is one of those shorter, 1, 2, 3 sitting, like one story, in my opinion. This is one of those one story domains. Yeah. That this is the core adventure here, like anything I can think of to do is going to be some variation of the play. It's going to be some variation of you are Orpheus and you are going to get a Eurydice or get Persephone.
Because with, again, going back to our Hercules episode, with that one, you got the sense of this wider world of Greek mythology. Yeah. Whereas in Hadestown, you almost get a sense of the Götterdämmerung has happened. Yeah, and Hades and Persephone and Hermes are the only ones left. Yeah. Like this world of Greek mythology has contracted to this single point. So there aren't these millions of stories you can tell here.
The only thing that matters in this setting is Hades and Persephone and Hadestown and up top.
And that the gods have forgotten the Song of Their Love.
And the gods have forgotten the Song of Love. It's the only thing that matters. The only thing that's happening in this setting. If you're like, well, what are the economic implications of Hades' factories? And who is he making these? It doesn't matter. No one cares.
No.
It's, don't worry about it. That's not, you can't get stories out of that other than having a little bit of Hadestown flavor on a generic kind of fantasy, steampunky setting. Be your guest, but that's not going to feel Hadestown. A game that feels Hadestown is going to be a variation of Hadestown. It's going to be that story. Yeah. We both agree on that. So that core adventure is going to be, you're in up top, you have to go through the back road to Hadestown or get a ticket.
You do the Orpheus thing. And you're trying to get someone to come back with you. And it might be one of the workers, and it might be Persephone. But like that's the story. Or it might be you don't get someone to return with you, but you persuade Hades to let Persephone go. Yeah.
Like that's it. Those 3 options I see. So now the part, if you stuck with us, this increasingly unlikely person I'm imagining is sticking with us, the part you're definitely going to tune out at. But for those of you, our regular fans, our regular listeners. All right.
Hi guys. We know, I know we've been directing a lot of this at possible new people who just saw Hadestown. And we're like, oh boy, Hadestown. No, we promise we're here for you too.
We're here for you too.
Our loyal listeners who might have seen this and said, Wonderful World of Darklords says we should listen to Hadestown. I'm going to do that now. We love you. We love you guys.
Also, you're welcome. For that.
It's so good. It's so good, guys.
Good, yeah. You're welcome.
It's so good.
Support some Patreon for more great musical theater suggestions. Something for you, a little treat for you guys. Rachel, is there a way I could, if I were running a game in the older 2nd edition, 3rd edition material, is there a way I could incorporate Hadestown, any of that?
There absolutely is. It's not as much as in some of the other domains we've talked about. Like, I think with Hercules, that went on for a while. Yeah. There's not as much as you could do with Hercules. But there is absolutely some stuff you can incorporate with Hadestown. We've already mentioned that you could have a connection with Hermes and Isolde. Because in the new stuff, Isolde's just kind of like, she's one of the regular, like, elf Eladrin.
Yeah.
In the older material, she was a celestial Eladrin. She was literally an angel. With old Isolde, because she was an angel, you can have it be that she and Hermes know each other and they're friends.
Yeah!
Because Hermes is also an angel in this version. So you could have it be, if you're doing stuff with Carnival, she mentions Hermes, or if you want to bring Carnival in later, Hermes mentions her. Or you could just have Isolde fill the Hermes role.
That's the cool thing.
Yeah. If you want to have it be that there's this angel who kind of knows what's going on and wants to help you, but also has their own stuff that they need to handle, then Isolde could be filling that role because she does want to help. She does want to make things better. And that's always been a thing of hers, that she doesn't just want to stop the caller. She also wants to make things better for the people of Ravenloft. So she wants to, help you get a Eurydice out of Hadestown. But she also has her own work she needs to do. Her primary goal is stopping the caller. So she's only going to give you a limited amount of help. So if you're doing a bunch of stuff with Carnival, Isolde can be the Hermes figure, and it'll be great.
And the nice thing here with Carnival, like, Carnival, absolutely there is the medieval Carnival tradition, the medieval, like, fair tradition. You can do a complete, like, no tech, just wagons and tents. But I think for a lot of people, the idea of a traveling carnival is a very 20th century.
Yeah. Like,
a very kind of, which fits Hadestown so well. Like, it's a kind of symbolic space. And so that's the thing, is it's good. One of those things where if you do a lot with Carnival, I think that's going to seg much more into this kind of steampunky Dust Bowl setting more than some of the other things. And in canon, like core Ravenloft. So it would just feel right if you're doing a lot with Carnival. You would go to a place and there'd be a railroad station.
Yeah.
And there'd be like this, there's factories. And there would be like all of these signifiers of that kind of 20th century mythic space.
Yeah.
Not going to do right about mythic space. Mythic Americana.
Tom is a religious studies major.
Yeah,
He's got thoughts. So that's the most obvious way to bring like a pretty major part of Old Ravenloft lore in. Now let's get into the Old Ravenloft
Looks
lore.
super obscure.
Esoterica. So for the Fates, and frankly...
I'm so excited. The script, the outline just says Furies.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Listeners, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't mention this in our Hercules episode. I apologize. I'm bringing it in now. So... I'm glad I saved it for now because it works beautifully for the Fates. In 2nd edition, I don't remember which of the Monstrous Compendium appendices it was.
Love you.
I love you too. The actual monkey-flunking Furies, Alecto, Tisiphone, and Megara, this is how I learned their names as a child, by the way, was from this Monstrous Compendium, showed up, and they were NPCs, and the idea with them was... To simplify it, if somebody was on the path to darkness and trying to turn back, then the Furies would show up kind of as a scourge to sort of drive them forward into darkness. And first, they would kind of like...
That's very Ravenloft.
Yeah. They'd try to tempt them onwards at first, and if that didn't work, then they'd be like, okay, well, if we have to beat this less than you, then we'll beat it in you. And they would, attack you with their weapons, which could only, as I recall, damage someone who had, done a certain number of evil acts.
Something. It was a different time, folks.
I'm referring to power checks, my fellow grognards. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But, so... That works beautifully for the Fates, actually. That you had the Furies kind of as these agents of corruption, as these agents of the dark powers, and there were even 3 of them.
Nice.
So if you want to bring in that older material and conflate the two, then you even have stats for the Furies in 2nd edition that you can give to the Fates.
Check. Obscure. If you got obscure, deep-cut Ravenloft lore on your bingo card, check.
The last thing that we have here goes back to when I was talking about our good Darklords versus our bad Darklords, way back in the beginning of this episode, which is Malus Sclerus.
Yeah, this guy.
This guy. So, Malus Sclerus, if you have listened to our Lion King episode, which, if you haven't and you're inspired to go back and listen to it, the sound quality is terrible because it's the first podcast we ever recorded.
It gets better fast, I promise.
Yeah. But so Malus Sclerus was the guy whose daddy was a druid and didn't pay enough attention to.
He hugged trees, but never me.
So he was like the Captain Planet villain Darklord. Because he wanted to get back at daddy by having as much pollution as possible.
The 90s were a heck of a time, guys.
Anybody who says OMG... WotC / Hasbro has gotten too woke.
Like, literally...
This was the TSR days.
There was a Captain Planet villain.
There was a Captain Planet villain Darklord who, wanted to make more and more pollution constantly, and everyone who lived in the domain was explicitly white, blonde, and blue-eyed. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So... It was kind of these themes of pollution and environmental exploitation, but done very heavy-handedly. And Hadestown is taking those same themes and doing them better, which is nice. If you want to have kind of an environmentalist domain, they do that sort of with New Haslan. New Haslan is very much the climate change
very
domain.
weird.
So yeah, New Haslan is a very weird domain. But if you want to have, the industrial hellscape domain, without bringing in Gnosis... and Malus Sclerus, whose daddy hugs trees, but not him, then Hadestown is a good way to do that.
Or if you didn't want the kind of underworld Hades and Persephone baggage, you could do a version of Gnosis. Gnosis,
yes.
With Malus Sclerus.
Yes.
But with much more Hades motivation. Take a lot of what they do with Hades in this show, and just have him not be like his whole like has the walled city where the people with the huge factories, and is legitimately like, yes, outside the walls the people are starving, the people are freezing, and I'm giving them security, and I'm giving them, you know, prosperity, and I'm giving them food and comfort and safety.
Yeah.
But is this horrible tyrant who just wants to basically rule over an enormous machine.
Yeah.
So, with those extremely obscure old Ravenloft material, the last thing we'd like to talk about in this section is the strengths and challenges of running a game set in this domain. Strengths, it's great. I say that all the time, don't I?
You do, but...
They're all great. We're too good at this.
If we didn't like the domain, then we wouldn't make the episode. That's, kind of the thing. Like,
yes.
It's like
that's very true.
There are plenty of movies where like, I guess we could make a domain out of this, but it wouldn't be very good, and we don't make those episodes.
Yeah.
So like, we only give you the episode if we feel good about it. So
you've got a cool steampunky setting that could be a nice change of pace. You've got a great Darklord, and the nice thing is the story, the descent and return to the underworld, means it's going to be a story very rooted in his psychology.
Yes.
Like, this is one where kind of the story by its nature of the PCs going way, way down to Hadestown, way down onto the ground, is going to get them engaged with Hades right away. Like, they're going to get on his radar. He's going to get involved. And the story is going to involve getting into his psychology, getting into his relationship with Persephone. Like, whatever they're trying to accomplish involves, in some ways, punching him in the marriage.
Yeah.
And I speaking of punching him in the marriage and not the face, I like that this is not going to be a boss fight, boss fight. That to win you have to persuade him, or trick him, or, you know, or offer him something he wants, or just it's a social intellectual boss fight. But the sort of cherry on top isn't just going to be talky, and the player that plays a barbarian just likes to hit things, is just sitting there the whole time asking if they can hit Hades. You're like, I hit him, and everyone's like, no, he doesn't. That with that dungeon crawl into Hadestown, going around the back way, you can have as much combat and dungeon crawling as you want. So there's something for everyone here. Like, your barbarian gets to fight a Cerberus, and that's pretty sweet. Like, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I beat a Cerberus. I punched him in all three of his heads. Like, the fighter used their double attack and then their action surge to hit all three of Cerberus's heads. And then your more role-play, intellectual, social, emotional players get to also kind of save the day by persuading, in some way, Hades to, like, give them what they want.
Yeah.
To let them either take someone out, or take Persephone out, or let Persephone go at the normal appointed time, or something.
Yeah. Just be nicer to Persephone. Something.
What about the challenges?
The number one challenge, and it's a thing that I don't think we've mentioned yet, but it's huge.
Yeah.
Is that to really feel like Hadestown / the Orpheus myth / Greek mythology in general, it needs the bittersweet ending.
Yes.
We haven't really talked about... it's not even a bittersweet ending, it just sucks.
Yeah, right. Just bitter.
It's
just
a tragic,
bitter.
It's a sad song. It's not a bittersweet song, it's a sad song. So to really get the full Hadestown experience, you need to have that downer ending. And you can't really plan for that without being real, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, if your PCs are, like, 100% on board, we're doing the Orpheus myth, we're going to look back. We know we're going to look back whether we want to or not. We're going to, like, our that's what our characters would do in a good way. Then, great. Otherwise, you might not get that full... So you need to know what your PCs want going in. Do they kind of want the Orpheus myth feel, or do they want to win?
And this default of D&D is winning, is not having that loss of control that kind of is inherent in the Orpheus looking back. So, like, please, don't do that. Everybody make a wisdom save.
No, gosh, no.
That would be awful.
The one way to have that work is if your PCs are like, I genuinely don't know whether I would look back or not.
Yes.
Because I could see that, like, with our group.
Right.
I could see that being the thing that happened with our group. I genuinely don't know what I would do.
Right.
Okay, make a wisdom save.
Yeah.
But don't have the be your default.
Don't be the default. Because then you even have the, like, you're like, haha, the DC is 30. And somebody's going to roll a natural 20, and then what do you do?
Yep.
Do you just say, well, it doesn't matter? Mm-hmm. Then you're basically telling them that you're cheating.
Yeah.
That it was a trick roll, and that thing that could have helped. Mm-hmm. Or do you kind of like not have that moment by being, nope, you're good. If only Orpheus had been you, if only Orpheus had your dice luck, then everything would have been happy now.
It says you set the DC at 30, you didn't plan for that moment. Yeah, so,
So you could also potentially make it work if you let them know this was a specific condition, if you let them know that sort of the deal Hades is making includes the kind of supernatural temptation. Mm-hmm. And then it's the equivalent of like, oh, he's casting a spell on you. Yeah. And this is the save. I'm like, well, okay, it's the save of the spell. But not just like, you're walking, make a wisdom save to not look back. Like, let them know this is something they're going to have to roll for if they take this deal.
Yeah. No matter what, though, it's going to be tricky. So,
But that's a challenge.
Yeah, that's a challenge, Similarly, the climax is this social emotional climax, but it's about an NPC's epiphany. Mm-hmm. And this even apparently was a huge thing that they have constantly been struggling with through all the rest of Hadestown, and in my opinion, never conquered. That Hades and Persephone are so much more interesting than Orpheus and Eurydice. So this is kind of a story about the NPCs, which is always a problem because it should be about the PCs. And if you're able to parallel it with the PCs, right, in the same way that Hadestown sort of parallels Orpheus and Eurydice's story with Hades and Persephone.
Yeah, I think that is the genius of this. Mm-hmm. And this is going to sound like hyperbolic and dumb, but this is a contribution to the canon of this myth, is specifically drawing that parallel between Orpheus and Eurydice, between Hades and Persephone, between the husband whose wife sort of leaves him, who goes away from him, and who, like, journeys to get her back, and, like, what that means emotionally. Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that parallel, then it's just kind of like, okay, this is about doing marriage counseling for NPCs. We're done. Also, with it being this social emotional climax, the D&D toolset is violence. Like, that's the default is you're going to go to combat.
About, like, 2/3 of the stuff on your character sheet is about violence.
Yeah. And that's not ultimately what the story's about. Even, like, violence isn't the solution in this story. Yeah. You know, you can't fireball Hades into submission. When the Hadestown people are beating Orpheus down, he doesn't cast fireball. He's like a 20th level bard. He can cast whatever he wants. He can cast power word kill. He's a 20th level bard, but he doesn't. He just gets beaten down. And, like, so it's going to be difficult to emulate this, given the D&D skill set. You really need to have a group that's cool doing a lot of role-playing, and who's role-playing enough to not have violence be their default solution to everything. Otherwise, it's gonna be a really jarring. If these, like, heavily armed butt kickers came into Hadestown and started, they're like, I'm here to chew bubble gum and fight Hades, and I'm all out of bubble gum. Yeah, like, I've mentioned in previous episodes, like, our group is very, like, role-play heavy. We do all these big, like, politics sessions where maybe the only dice rolls that happen are deception and insight and persuasion. That would be great for this party. If that's not your party, this might not be the setting.
This might not be the setting for them, as much as you love Hadestown. Which is good for you.
Yes.
But that might not be right for them. So, we've outlined the strengths, we've outlined the challenges. We hope that there are some people out there who are going to be able to take this and get an inspiration to bring some Hadestown content to their group, that this is the right fit for them, this is the right fit for their group.
We hope, if nothing else, you've introduced some of our listeners to Hadestown because we love it so much.
And, as I said, you're welcome. And if that is you, this is right for your group, if you run a Hadestown adventure, if you indeed have discovered Hadestown thanks to our podcast and want to thank us, how can they tell us?
Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and Tumblr at Wonderful World of Darklords. And I figured out what was going on our Patreon, so you can also find us on Patreon at Wonderful World of Darklords.
Great day!
No numbers, just Wonderful World of Darklords. It's a miracle. Praise Hades.
If you like the way that we adapted Hadestown and talked about some of the horrific potential of both the cosmic memory wipe and some of the real world stuff. I have a couple of adventures on DM's Guild where I've adapted horror movies and other things into 5e adventures. So if you just search for Tom Kohler or follow the link to the domain write-up, there's a free domain write-up on DM's Guild, follow the link to the domain write-up and just look for more by this author. Or if you like our consideration for how this wouldn't really work for kids, then we also do have some resources on DM's Guild for running spooky or horror themed games for younger players.
And if you look at Hadestown and just say, my goodness, they take this spooky thing and give it rhyme and rhythm, and they take this old story and put a fresh spin on it, then maybe you would like nursery rhymes rewritten to be about Halloween. In which case you would like my book, Mother Ghost, Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters. 13 classic nursery rhymes rewritten with Halloween twists.
I feel like the Venn diagram and overlap between people that like Hadestown and people that like Halloween is not as absolute as people that like Dungeons and Dragons and people that like Halloween, but it's there.
It's there.
It exists. There's an overlap. Those two circles overlap.
So if you like the sound of Mary, Mary, Tall and Scary and Wee Willie Werewolf, go check out my book. Also, if you like kind of stories that are sort of about these themes of loss and like toxic relationships.
There's a reason this really appealed to Rachel.
Go to my website, www.rachelkohler.com. Check out my short stories, specifically 99-Cent Dreams. I think you're going to love that one. And that's where all my short stories for adults are.
Until next time, thank you for listening. If you are one of our imaginary Hadestown only fans discovering for the first time, you've made it this far, good for you. I appreciate your stick-to-itness. And our other podcast, Will Also About Dungeons and Dragons, also have a lot of really good, clever, interesting insights into Disney movies, which statistically you are a fan of. But for those of you who are just joining us, for those of you longtime listeners who may be about to discover Hadestown, for those of you longtime listeners who already liked Hadestown and were super excited when you saw this, thank you for listening, whoever you are, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. By all reports, Hadestown is a trap. Mr. Hades builds his massive wall to protect his wife and his children from the outside world, which means protecting them from leaving him. I can only hope those disgusting witches do not follow me on the next leg of my journey, but from what I have heard, there is little room for their brand of vague mysticism in the lights, machines, and chaos of San Francisco. Regards, D.
Until now, I have only learned of Hadestown from bardic ballads and legends. Frustratingly, there has been sparse evidence of its existence. No doubt the little Eladrin keeps the truth of his empire close to his chest. For who among the living would willingly delve into the depths of Hadestown if they knew the truth? My servant is resourceful, or perhaps simply fortunate, to encounter a soul that escaped Mr. Hades' grasp and was brave enough to share her tale. One would think that mindless undead would be preferable for the purpose of a continuous, remedial labor required to construct a massive wall. After all, a horde of zombies care not for worldly comforts. Yet, Hades utilizes people that must eat, drink, and waste countless hours each evening in deep sleep to survive. Perhaps he requires one in possession of a soul to power some unseen element of his empire. Or he simply desires control and power over those beneath him. The wall, as my servant astutely observed, is to keep his subjects within Hadestown and is the symbol of Hades' control. As long as he can force them to build it, his children cannot leave him. Hadestown is far from the only realm within the mist that lorded over by an insecure, overgrown child unable to let go of the one they claim to love. Bah! Hades may distract himself with colorful songbirds, but he shall never realize it is the warmth of Persephone that his people crave, not the cold grip of winter. Of course, as is the design of these misty prisons, he craves the same.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at Darklord Aslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening. Now Danny was a frightened young girl, but hid her fear down where she could ignore. She tried to pit herself against the world to show it couldn't scare her anymore.